Honorable Speaker, I stand to second. Thank you, Speaker.
Member for Isiolo, can you sit? Don't be so migratory, you know. And member for Fafi, Dugis, Ijara, find some place to sit. Honourable members, I propose a question, which is that the Insurance Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 21, be now read a third time. Very well, it's the desire of the House, I put the question. Having confirmed that there is the requisite quorum, which is that the Insurance Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 21 of 2018, be now read a third time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say no? No. The ayes have it. Well, honourable members, you know, honourable members, some of us have been at these games for so long. The tricks which a few members are learning this late can't just cause confusion. Very well, proceed.
A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Insurance Act.
Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I want to stand on a point of order, and pursuant to Standing Order 40, subsection 2, which empowers the Speaker of the National Assembly to direct the sequence of disposing business of the House as scheduled on the order paper. I wish to seek your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, that the business appearing as order number 10 on the order paper, namely motion on the report of the Budget and Appropriation Committee on the 2019-2020 budget policy statement, and business appearing as order number 11, namely Committee of the Whole House for consideration of the presidential reservations to the Health Laws Amendment Bill, be accorded priority so as to consider immediately after disposing of business appearing as order number 8, which you have already done. Mr. Speaker, the rationale for prioritizing consideration of the motion on the report of the Budget and Appropriation Committee emanates from the fact that Section 25, subsection 7. Speaker, I really want Honorable Wamalwa to listen to me, because Section 25, subsection 7 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 requires the House to consider the report within 14 days of its submission. Further, Mr. Speaker, the adoption of the report will set forth the publication of the Division of Revenue Bill and subsequently the county allocation of revenue bill, which are critical in the fiscal operations and management of both the national and county governments. Honorable Speaker, the rationale for prioritizing the Committee of the Whole House for considering the President's reservation to the health laws is based on the fact that the House has a timeline of 21 days to consider the President's reservation in line with the Standing Order 154-2. In conclusion, Honorable Speaker, the two business regarding which I seek you to rearrange the order paper have specific timelines that ought to be adhered to, hence the request that I'm putting. Mr. Speaker, the matter in order number 11, is a matter that we can discuss, but the two matters that I've raised, Mr. Speaker, are matters that have timelines. The BPS report from the Budget Committee and the presidential reservation. We can then, after that, discuss the other business which have no timelines, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I really want to indulge my colleagues and you, Mr. Speaker, to rearrange the order, and we start with the Committee of the Whole House, and then we go to the BPS, then we can deal with the other matters as they come. Speaker, I beg to move.
Well, Leader Majority, your request, no, it doesn't require, that does not require seconding. That does not require seconding. It's just, for the reason stated that the budget policy statement and the presidential memorandum both have got timelines. In fact, both of them must be concluded today. It's important for members to appreciate this. Both of them must be concluded today. But did I understand the Leader Majority to be suggesting that the House moves into committee first? Leader Majority, did the presidential memorandum to be the first?
To be the first, because, Mr. Speaker, the presidential memorandum does not take long. It takes less than 20 minutes. Because if you disagree with the president, no. I'm only telling the Speaker the memorandum will only take 20 minutes.
Well, honourable members, I think the Leader Majority is rising, and there is no, unfortunately, you must understand your standing orders. It's not everything that is disposed of in the manner that you propose. This, you have no role in it at all. It is for the convenience of the House. And the reason given is that, particularly with the memorandum, it's just a matter of you raising some of them. You may have to raise the numbers. If you don't have the numbers, you know what happened yesterday. So it's a matter that I believe you dispose of very fast. And because it has today's deadline, that's all that the Leader Majority is asking. So it's a very simple matter. And if that be so, and I'm persuaded that those two you need to conclude them today before you undertake any other business. It is for the convenience. Now some of you are muttering or murmuring what standing order. Again, you have not looked at your standing order number 40. So this is for avoidance of doubt and for the convenience of the House. Of the standards of nursing commodities as a function of the Nursing Council. The committee seems to be of the view that the regulation of the standards of nursing commodities is a function that should be retained by the Nursing Council until such time as Parliament enacts a single regulatory body for the regulation of health products and health technologies as provided in Section 62 of the Health Act number 21 of 2017. This amendment, therefore, does not accommodate the President's reservations and is indeed a direct negative. In this case, the provisions of Article 115, subsection clause 4, paragraph A of the Constitution will apply. Consequently, passage of section 9(1), subsection 1, clause Roman 1 of the Nurses Act, Cap 257, will require the support of at least 2/3 of the membership of this House. In summary, honourable members, as regards the amendments proposed to the President's memorandum by the Departmental Committee on Health, I wish to guide as hereunder. 1, that the passage of the committee's amendment in Section 3, subsection 1 of the proposed text to the Pharmacy and Poisons Act, Cap 244, shall require a simple majority. 2, that the passage of the committee's amendment to Section 4, subsection 1 of the proposed text, the Nurses Act, Cap 257, shall also require a simple majority. 3, that the passage of the committee's amendment to Section 9, subsection 1, Roman 1 of the Nurses Act, Cap 257, shall require support of at least 2/3 of the membership of the House as it proposes to negate the reservations of the President. And with regard to the text of the amendments recommended by the President, which will essentially be moved by the leader of the majority party, the guidance contained in my communication of 28th of July 2015 will apply. Indeed, I have reiterated the contents of the same communication severally, particularly on 1, the simple majority requirement for agreement with the text proposed in the President's reservations, and 2, the 2/3 voting requirements in respect of any proposal to negate the text proposed in the President's reservations. The House is accordingly so guided. I thank you. As already guided, the next business will be business appearing as number 11, followed by the business appearing as number 10, and thereafter the business appearing as under number 9. That will be the order of business. Next.
Order number 11, Committee of the Whole House.
To insert the definition of the term pharmaceutical device in Section 2 of the Pharmacy and Poisons Act, which if members have the present memorandum, they can read it. This definition, in the opinion of the President, in his exercise of Article 115 of the Constitution, is identical to the definition of the term health product. And further, the term is not also usually used internationally and is not aligned to World Health Organization. And again, just like I said earlier, this may cause confusion when the application of that term comes into effect. And also it affects our international collaboration. So the President is recommending that the definition term pharmaceutical device be deleted.
Okay. I propose the question, which is that Section 3B3 of the Pharmacy and Poisons Act be amended as proposed. Do you want to contribute or you're on a point of order? Honorable Wamalo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, we know presidential assent under Article 115. You know, to overturn it needs 2/3. Something very difficult, something impossible. But I'm just worried of the trend of His Excellency President legislating through the back door. It should also focus on some of the critical things, not small things like grammar, which can be handled in a miscellaneous amendment, so that we go to the substance when it comes to legislation. I thank you and I support.
Okay, since you're supporting, I think we'll leave it at that. Yes. Honorable Dr. Makali?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, while the explanation provided by the mover is very clear, I think, Madam Chair, it also becomes an issue of concern when you, Madam Chair, you look at the fact that this bill went through our committee, parliamentary committee, which has serious experts also in this area. And I wonder how come some of these small things which are appearing in the final, why do we have to wait up to the presidential level to say, amend this, delete this? I think it just says we need to do much more as a committee of parliament to get some of these small things right, even though I support.
I wish the chair was here to pick on those on that important feedback from members. But I don't know if members of the committee are here, and the leader of majority is also here. Let's give the leader first.
Honorable Chair, I really totally agree with Honorable Makani Mulu. And before even we dealt with this bill at the last stage, we gave the Minister for Health and all the technical team in that ministry the opportunity, and we went by their way. And it's very, very sad if, you know, the cabinet misadvised the president on small definitions. You know, small definitions. Because these even could have been corrected in the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendment Bill that will come. So we want the president to exercise his referral powers under Article 115 on serious issues. And I really want to thank members. And the Chair of Health should have told us that. So we are sending a message to the Minister for Health. Don't misadvise the president, and I think the AG must take note of this, that don't make the president look bad. He uses his referral powers on small definitions, which Parliament can deal with.
Yeah, I think it's well said. Honorable Millie? Can you come to the dispatch? I hope the dispatch is working.
Chair, I don't know what referendum issue I'm being told about. But if it is a referendum on the gender issue, of course, count me in. And if you are not passed it on the House, it must come as a mainstream issue. But that aside, Chair, it is very rare that I agree with the leader of majority. And if you see me and the leader of majority agreeing on an issue, then it is actually a very serious issue. It's an issue I've raised before, and I think the cabinet secretaries are misadvising the president. And sometimes they bring it as a reservation of the president when it is not a reservation of the president. They are lazy, they don't do their work ab initio, and after Parliament has sat and passed their work, they go back in the pretext of the president. When a bill is brought back to Parliament by the president, it has to be a very serious issue that requires us to sit here for 2/3, because otherwise it looks like the president is micromanaging the legislature, which is very wrong. So let them do their work and they let us do our work. Some of these things they can persuade us when we are doing the bill when it came here. Yeah, so why don't they come and do their work at the right time? Thank you, Chair.
Well said. Member for Seme?
I'm a member of the committee, and I want to thank all the members who have raised the issue. This was a matter of great concern in the committee. Issues of definition, issues that could have done in miscellaneous amendments were brought. And at the committee, we actually said, when it stated to the officials, the minister didn't come in the last meeting when we were considering that they take advantage of their access to the president to advise on issues that are actually not issues. And if some of you read the papers, I was quoted as saying that these are things that should not have come. In fact, there is one that we are coming later, which we decided as a committee that we don't want to raise a big issue of getting 2/3 because it will be very difficult. And therefore, we let many of these pass. On the final one that will come, we may again, the issue of 2/3 will come, but we'll discuss that it comes. I thank members of this assembly who have said that in this case, the ministry did not advise the president appropriately. And sometimes, these are not just matters in definition. There's one issue where actually, technically, it has not been done properly, and we'll raise that when the time comes. Thank you.
Okay, Member for Seme, I hope you will take the feedback also back to the committee.
Yes.
Since the chair is not here. The last one from Honorable Junet.
Chair, thank you. Chair, this bill should not have come back to the House. This is one of the bills that spent a lot of time in this House, Madam Chair. And the president in this system of governance should not be allowed to legislate through the back door, Madam Chair. If he has issues, the bill originated first from government. It should have covered all matters that the president feels should have been covered. But now that it spent here a lot of time, Madam Chair,
The president is not legislating through the back door. I want to go on record. The president is legislating his reservation under Article 115 of the Constitution. All that we are saying, all the members who spoke before Honorable Junet, is that there are small issues that the president, in fact, for him to refer and exercise Article 115, it must be in very rare cases. Maybe in a year, twice or thrice. Yes, and I'll pass that message. But the president is not committing an illegality. He is exercising a provision. And that provision is true because in the event Parliament becomes rogue, where the Parliament becomes rogue, the president, as a CEO who is elected by millions of Kenyans, must exercise that veto power. It even happens in the US Congress. It happens in all parliaments. Even Trump, the other day when he was refused the money to build walls, he used that veto power. Now he's building the wall. No. Let us move.
Let's move, honorable members. I put the question, which is that Section 3B3 of the Pharmacy and Poisons Act, as amended, be approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Section 24.
I propose the question that Section 24 of the Pharmacy and Poisons Act be amended as recommended by the President. The mover.
Section 24, if you have the presidential memorandum, it's in page 8. Mheshimiwa Malwa. You know, he's a serious, him and the Honorable Member for Seme. Madam Chair, the bill did not initially propose any amendment to Section 24 of the Pharmacy and Poisons Act. But this House, however, amended that section of the Act by deleting the word pharmacist and substituting it, therefore, with the words pharmaceutical practice. The effect of that amendment, which the House did, which the President is disagreeing with, is that poisons may be handled by persons who do not possess the requisite competence to handle them, putting the general public at risk. And Madam Speaker, from the foregoing reason given by the President, he recommends that the proposed amendment to Section 24 of the Pharmacy and Poisons Act be deleted from the bill.
I propose a question, which is that Section 24 of the Pharmacy and Poisons Act be amended as proposed. I go on to put the question, which is that Section 24 of the Pharmacy and Poisons Act, as amended, be approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now put the question, which is that the provisions on the presidential recommendations relating to the Pharmacy and Poisons Act be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
The Medical Practitioners and Dentists Act, Cap 253, new Section 4B.
I propose a question that new Section 4B of the Medical Practitioners and Dentists Act be amended as recommended by the President. Mover.
Madam Chair, the bill proposed to amend the Medical Practitioners and Dentists Act by inserting a new section, 4B, paragraph F of the proposed Section 4B, which reads, to invest any funds of the Council not immediately required for its purpose. So Parliament introduced that. This provision gives the Council unlimited power to invest any funds of the Council that are not immediately required for this purpose, without reference to the Public Finance Management Act. And you know, all public resources must be done within the framework of the PFM Act of 2012. And because this provides for the manner in which public funds must be invested, then the president feels that this investment of public funds in a manner which is not consistent with the PFM Act 2012, then it becomes a problem in how to account for public resources. And from that foregoing reasons, the president recommends that the proposed paragraph F in 4B be deleted and replaced with the following: invest any of the council funds not immediately required for its purpose, but in accordance with the PFM Act of 2012 and other relevant laws. I beg to move.
Okay. I go on to propose the question, which is that new section 4B of the Medical Practitioners and Dentists Act be amended as proposed. Dr. Makali?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this amendment is very important, Madam Chair, because, Madam Chair, we know the operational law in terms of public finance is Public Finance Management Act 2012. And where a reference is not made to this act, Madam Chair, I agree with the President that this might lead to misappropriation or misdirection of public resources. So it is a very important amendment. I support it.
Leader of Majority?
Madam Speaker, I think the security of the chamber is under threat. There's a serious caucus going on. Can you ask what's happening?
Honorable Millie and company? Is that Honorable Millie? And Honorable Musimba, kindly disband the Kamukunji and come back to the chamber. You are all out of order. Come back to the chamber. Honorable Mbui?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I was beginning to feel that maybe my card was invisible, but I thank you for this opportunity. Chair, on this one, I also really support the President because, you see, in the past we've had situations where boards, commissions, and organizations, government organizations are allowed to invest money, and they have actually invested money in very bad manners and they've lost a lot of money. So I really support this because there's two things here that make a lot of sense. The money should not be immediately required, so that means they should not invest money that is required for their purposes. And two, it must be done in accordance with the Public Finance Management Act. So I think that's in order, and that's an excellent proposal. I support it.
Very well. I go on to put the question, which is that new section 4B of the Medical Practitioners and Dentists Act, as amended, be approved. Will as many of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I go on to put the question, which is that new section 4B of the Medical Practitioners and Dentists Act be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
The Nurses Act, Cap 257, Section 4.1.
I propose the question, which is that Section 4.1 of the Nurses Act be amended as recommended by the President. Mover.
Chair, Section 4 of the Nurses Act provides for the membership of the Nursing Council of Kenya. The bill initially provided for the deletion of Section 4 and its replacement with a new Section 4 that included the Director General of Health as a member of the Council. But the House deleted that proposal. So the initial proposal in the bill is in line with the current policy in respect of regulatory bodies in the health sector. And from that reason, the President recommends the amendment of the proposed new section by inserting in the new paragraph, immediately after paragraph 1, Roman 1, that the Director General of Health or a representative appointed in writing by the Director General of Health to be a member. Thank you.
I go on to propose the question, which is that Section 4.1 of the Nurses Act be amended as proposed. I put the question, which is that Section 4.1 of the Nurses Act as amended be approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. You're anticipating the process, member for Seme. Just relax. Yes, there's an amendment by the committee. Chair?
Chair, the amendment by the committee is basically as in the order paper, and what it seeks to do is it agrees with the President's amendment that the Director General should be there, but therefore it was felt on the other hand that then you are increasing the number of members of the committee, and therefore we felt, Mr. Speaker, that we should remove one of the members so that the number remains the same, but it still accommodates the admission of the President's view that we should have the Director General. So that is the import of that amendment.
Okay, I go on then to propose the question, which is that Section 4.1 of the Nurses Act be amended as proposed by the committee. I go on to put the question, which is that Section 4.1 of the Nurses Act as amended be approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Section 9.1.
I propose a question, which is that Section 9.1 of the Nurses Act be amended as recommended by the President. Mover.
Madam Chair, Section 9.1 of the Nurses Act provides for the function and the annual report of the Nursing Council of Kenya, but paragraph 1 provides to have regard, Roman 1, to have regard for the standards of nursing care, qualified staff, nursing commodities, facilities, and all that. This provision gives the Nursing Council of Kenya a mandate over standards of, among others, nursing commodities. The bill from government initially proposed a deletion of the word nursing commodities in Section 9.1, Roman 1 of the Nurses Act. The rationale for the proposal was the need to align that provision with the current policy of separating the regulation of commodities from the regulation of the health professionals in order to increase efficiency, effectiveness, and reduce the cost of doing business. The proposal was also intended to implement Section 62 of the Health Act 2017 that required the establishment of a single regulatory body to regulate health products and health technologies. And from the foregoing reason, the President recommends that Section 9.1, Roman 1 of the Nurses Act be amended by just deleting the word nursing commodities, because this amendment was rejected by the House, thus the words remained in the Act.
I go on to propose a question, which is that Section 9.1 of the Nurses Act be amended as proposed. I go on to put the question, which is that Section 9.1 of the Nurses Act be amended, as amended, be approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The The ayes have it. There is a committee amendment. Member for Seme.
Yes.
Honorable Member for Seme, as you proceed to prosecute the committee amendment, you should take note of the threshold that is required to actually overturn a presidential reservation. And we don't need to repeat that the speaker's ears cannot count numbers, cannot count noise. So I think you should stand advised and
I will, but
maybe do the necessary. Honorable Member for Seme.
Chair, there is a committee amendment.
What is out of order, Honorable Wamalo?
Madam Chair, ordinarily, where you
Kindly
look
have a seat,
you
Honorable
must be
Member
able
for
to
Seme.
ascertain. You are supposed to ascertain the numbers when it comes, and that has been the practice. So the issue
But
is,
we are not
you-
yet there, Honorable Wamalwa. Why don't we, let us have the member of Seme to prosecute. Honorable Leader.
Chair, in the order paper, we have the chair of the committee. The member for Seme cannot purport to represent the chair without written expression. Consent. If he has a written letter, and that is the standing orders. If he doesn't have it, he cannot. It's like those characters who mimed the president's name. You cannot. So can he first provide evidence that the chair has sent him?
Member for Seme? You might have even prosecuted the other one.
It looked quite plausible that if I drop the amendment, that would be fine. That may be exactly where we are going. I do understand the procedures, and I know that in order to prosecute this amendment, we will need 2/3.
But do you have
I'm
the
aware of
chair's
that.
authority?
Madam Speaker, what I want to say, and the world should know and you should let, when a committee decides to go against the President's memorandum, it is important for people to know why. We will then say whether we'll proceed. It is clear to me we will not proceed. The reason is simple. This is about nursing commodities. Things like syringes, things like needles, things like blood pressure machine. Now
Honorable Member for Seme, you are out of order. You either prosecute the committee's amendment by establishing that you have the authority to do so, and also with the understanding that it could be an exercise in futility because of the threshold which is required, or you don't go beyond that, Member for Seme.
Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, I will say this. We cannot, again what all the members said here, that the ministry or the minister advises the president in a way that really is not technical. There is no way we will get syringes, needles, this to be regulated by somebody else. We have in the Health Act that they should have implemented, which would have solved this problem. The ministry has not implemented the act. And therefore, they are actually
Member for Seme, you're skipping a very important step of this process. We have not proposed the question. So you are debating what is not yet in front of the House.
I know when you propose this, you're going to ask me for a letter. Our chair has very cleverly left the House without a letter.
What is out of order, Member for Sunais?
I know. Yeah, I know. So I must not leave the Kenya. I'm representing Kenyans now.
Madam Chair, the honorable member is in order, Madam Chair, because it's only that he doesn't have the requisite number of 2/3 to move his amendment. But what he's trying to do is trying to give reasons why he wants to move his amendments, knowing very well that he doesn't have the numbers. So he's in order to that extent, but he's out of order, Madam Speaker. I want you to rule that he's out of order, that he cannot debate his amendment before even he moves it on the floor, Madam Speaker.
Okay, let's move on. I believe we are moving to the next step. Member for Seme, do you want to prosecute the committee amendment?
But there's no number.
But you'll be wasting the time of the House.
No, I will be giving information
To who?
to the House and to the country.
No, I think we will move on, Member for Seme, because you cannot do that before we propose the question, and you know that very well. Member for Seme, I want you to either withdraw or you actually prosecute the amendment.
Withdrawal, I have authority. If for withdrawal I have authority, then even for prosecuting, I can't have authority one way only.
Do you have the authority? Do you have the locus standi to prosecute the committee's amendment?
Being a member of SEM and sitting here and being a health committee, I have.
Okay, then I am tempted to just go on to pronounce the amendment dropped. And that is the direction we have to take.
I will drop it. Let me just explain, then I drop it.
No. Honorable members, I declare the committee amendment dropped. And we move on to the next.
Section 11.
I propose the question, which is that Section 11 of the Nurses Act be amended as recommended by the President. Mover.
Chair, in Section 11, the bill proposed to amend Section 11(5) of the Nurses Act by deleting the existing provision and substituting, therefore, with a new subsection, which is in the order paper. The other amendment vests upon the Council the power to make a determination in terms of the remuneration and allowances of officers appointed under that section, without reference to SRC, which is mandated by Article 230, subsection 4B of the Constitution, which is to advise on the remuneration of public officers. The provision then contravenes Article 234B of the Constitution, and for that reason, the President recommends that the proposed Section 11(5) of the Nurses Act be deleted and replaced with the following: that the officers appointed under this section shall be paid such allowances and remuneration as the Council may be on advice of SRC for them to make a determination. I beg to move.
I go on to propose a question, which is that Section 11 of the Nurses Act be amended as proposed. Dr. Makali?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, you know, the more the Leader of Majority continues prosecuting these amendments, the more I get worried. We all know SRC is mandated by the Constitution to take care of public officers' salaries and allowances. So how come there was such a serious omission that you just give our council a free hand to do all these things without reference to SRC? I think, Madam Chair, this Committee of Health needs to help us. We look very bad in the eyes of the public. We look very bad because people know very well.
Are you a member of the committee?
I'm not a member of the committee, so I'm just saying it makes us look bad as a house. When this thing has to come from the presidency, when we have the legislative mandate of this country.
I support.
Leader? Leader of majority?
Chair, I totally agree with the Honorable Makali, and this is an indictment on the legal officer clerking that committee, in terms of when amendments are prepared. How do you bring an amendment and the House votes into it when that amendment is unconstitutional? This is what the member is saying. So the clerk to that committee, Honorable Makali, I think is making Parliament, how do we legislate? Now the President in his memorandum is telling us that you guys, you have passed an amendment which is unconstitutional. So it's not the committee, but the person who clerks that committee, the legal officer, the person who prepared that amendment. And the Hansard should be used, and that officer must be held responsible. That officer must be held responsible. Because why do we have the most robust legal department headed by a competent person? We have the most robust budget office. Now, when such an amendment passes, and then the President is telling us, you guys, let me exercise my Article 115 powers, this is just, it's very shameful. I agree with Honorable Makali, and I think Parliament must act. This officer must be, whoever prepared that amendment that passed this House must be held to account.
Honorable Nikal?
Chair, we agreed with that amendment on exactly what has been said. But I think there's a bigger problem in the committee, including the ministry. When you see these things happening, there's some undue influence that is coming, and I dare say that kind of influence is coming from the ministry. That is why even what we have agreed, this should have come before us without going to, because even the ministry itself has legal officers. So how does it that it comes? And let me say something. Madam Speaker, we very often see in that committee where we should have technical people, we don't see technical people, particularly the Office of the Director of Medical Services. And I don't think he refuses to come. I believe his exclusion is deliberate. And if that happens, then you have things like this. This is why we have a technical recommendation about nursing commodities going to the President, changing it without the technical input that was required. I agree that it is not only the legal office in the committee, but we must look at even the legal office in the ministry, and also even the ministry itself. I support.
Thank you, Member for Seme. These are very serious issues being raised, and as a member of the committee, I hope you will brief the chair accordingly, and the Honorable Leader of Majority, again, will take this up with the relevant ministries.
You know, Madam Chair, Honorable Nyikal is even making it worse. The committee where Honorable Nyikal sits is supposed to oversight this ministry. Is he telling this House now they are not able to say this, to oversight the ministry properly, Madam Chair? Because when he says the director of Medical Services is not being participating in this thing, what message are we sending to us as members of Parliament? We are your colleagues. Are you telling us this ministry you can't?
Well, we will stop it there, honorable members. There are definitely issues that need to be taken back to the committee and the ministry. And Honorable Nyikal and the Leader of Majority, I'm sure will do that. I go on to put the question, which is that Section 11 of the Nurses Act, as amended, be approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I go on to put the question, which is that the provisions relating to the presidential recommendations on the Nurses Act be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. And honorable members, again for the record, I just want to reiterate that the committee's recommendations, or committee's amendments on section 9(1) have had to be dropped for purposes of the constitutional threshold that is required to reverse a presidential memo.
The Counselors and Psychologists Act, number 14 of 2014, sections 15, section 16, section 17, section 18, section 19, section 20, section 21, and section 22.
I propose a question, which is that section 15, section 16, section 17, section 18, section 19, section 20, section 21, and section 22 of the Counselors and Psychologists Act be deleted as recommended by the President. Mover.
Chair, section 15 was initially a proposed deletion of section 15 on the Counselors and Psychologists Act, which provided for the establishment of the Kenya Counselors and Psychological Society of Kenya. And the rationale was just the society is a welfare organization that is independent of the Cabinet Secretary for Health. The society ought to have been established under the Societies Act. And that's why the President, based on that, it should be deleted. It's in the wrong place. On section 16, again, the bill initially proposed the deletion of section 16 of the Counselors and Psychologists Act, which provided for the membership of a society, and the provision makes each person registered under this act as a member of society. The membership of each person who is registered under this act is mandatory, contrary to Article 36(2) of the Constitution, which provides for voluntary membership in associations. So that's again the other reason the President is deleting, because it contravenes Article 36(2), the same story. The same story. I mean, the legal officer, an Honorable Nyikal, it's not about, we have no business with the legal officers in the Ministry of Health. They don't prepare amendments. They don't touch our order paper. The people who prepare amendments and prepare our order paper are the legal department and the legislative department of the House. So I don't think we have no business with the legal. Again, it's about constitutional contradiction. The President is saying, you guys, what you have passed is unconstitutional. And for that reason, the President is recommending that that also be deleted, section 16. Section 17, Madam Chair, initially proposed also the deletion of 17 of the Counselors and Psychologists Act. And this was on the election of the chairperson of the society in accordance with the third schedule, and also the qualification of that chairperson. However, as a consequence of the proposed one we deleted in 15, this matter is supposed to be under the Societies Act. So the President recommends that also we delete section 17. Now, section 18 was dealing with the functions of the society. A mandate of the society to establish standards of professional competence, and among others. And this is a regulatory function which ought to be, again, the mandate of this board under section 3 of the Act as a regulator and the psychologist. And again, it recommends that this is amended by deleting section 18. Section 19 was about, again, Counselors and Psychologists Act, and it provided for the Council of the Society. The proposal was rejected by the House. However, as a consequence of the one we did in 15, which we deleted, a Council of the Society shall not be required, because we deleted should be under the Societies Act. And the President has recommended that we amend the Psychologists Act by deleting section 19. Section 20 proposes the deletion of section 20 of the Counselors Act. And this was providing for the Committee of the Council of Society. This proposal again follows, once we have deleted 15, consequently it has no place, it has no legs, and the committee shall not be required. And the President recommends that we delete section 20. Section 21 of the Councillors and Psychologists Act provides for the membership of the Council of the Society and their election. Again, the moment we have deleted 15 and 19, then the membership shall not be required. So we agree, the President says we must amend by deleting section 21. Section 22, which is the last one, Madam Chair, of the Councillors and Psychologists Act, provides for the Secretary of the Council. Consequently, again, of course, the moment we delete section 15 and 19, then the Secretary to the Council shall not be required. So the President recommends that from section 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22 be deleted.
I go on to propose a question, which is that sections 15 through to section 22 of the Councillors and Psychologists Act be amended as proposed. Honorable Nikal?
Chair, I support this, and Leader of Majority has actually brought the point. It was basically that in this act, we were also establishing a society. In fact, at the committee, it was actually rejected. And I think, if I remember right, it was restored here in the House. But we had rejected because you can't establish that which would be in the Societies Act. So once that is done, the rest followed. I support.
Okay. I put the question. Yes, Leader of Majority.
Again, comes back to our legal department. When the amendment was brought by Honorable Wamunyinyi, yes, for him to bring to the House, they should have told him, this is in the wrong bill. This is supposed to be in the Societies Act. That is the legal opinion, which they never did.
I go on to put the question, which is that sections 15 through to section 22 of the Councillors and Psychologists Act as amended be approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Third and fourth schedule.
I propose a question that the third and fourth schedules of the Councillors and Psychologists Act be amended as recommended by the President. The mover?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The third schedule initially proposed a deletion of that schedule to the Councillors and Psychologists, which provides for the manner of the election of the chairperson. And this proposal was rejected by the House and even the committee. However, as a consequence of what we have done, the deletion we have done to 15 and 17, the procedure for election of the chairperson shall not be required. So we are asking for a deletion of that section on the third schedule. And then on the fourth schedule, the same. Because we have deleted section 15, 19, and 21, the procedure for the election of the members of the councillors and psychologists shall not be required. So they should not be in the schedule. And that's what the President is recommending.
I go on then to propose the question, which is that the third and fourth schedules of the Councillors and Psychologists Act be amended as proposed. And I go on to put the question, which is that the third and fourth schedules of the Councillors and Psychologists Act as amended be approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I go on to put the question, which is that the presidential recommendations relating to the Councillors and Psychologists Act be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
The Clinical Officers Training, Registration and Licensing Act, number 20 of 2017, section 4(1).
I propose a question, which is that section 4(1) of the Clinical Officers Training, Registration and Licensing Act be amended as recommended by the President. Mover?
Chair, I'm telling Honorable Junior, this is the last one. You know, you went out to have tea and mandazi. That I beg to move that section 4(1) be amended as proposed by His Excellency the President. Of course, the bill proposed to amend section 4(1) of the Clinical Officers Act of 2017 by doing only one thing, deleting the provisions and substituting therefore a new provision, which is in the order paper. Madam Chair, this provision does not stipulate that the chairperson of the Clinical Officers Council shall be a clinical officer. This is unlike other legislation that establish regulatory bodies in the health sector, which require that the chairperson of the respective regulator must come from the respective discipline. And there is need for clarity on who may be appointed as a chairperson of the Clinical Officers Council. So, you know, a quack can become the chair of this. So the president is saying, like other bodies, the person who will become the chair must be a clinical officer. Yeah, it can be a cattle herder. It can become a guy who owns a chemist. So the president is recommending that are registered as a clinical officer under this act. He's saying he must be registered. And that is the amendment of the president in his reservation.
I go on to propose, I have to propose first, to propose the question, which is that section 4(1) of the Clinical Officer Training, Registration and Licensing Act be amended as proposed. And I go on to Honorable Nyikal.
Chair, the only gap that was left there, that if you use the word clinical officers and do not include registered, he may be a clinical officer who actually didn't proceed to be registered. But in other things, I support.
Okay. I go on to put the question, which is that section 4(1) of the Clinical Officers Training, Registration and Licensing Act as amended be approved. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I go on to put the question, which is that the presidential recommendations relating to the Clinical Officers Training, Registration and Licensing Act be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. The mover? Mover to move reporting.
Chairperson, I beg to move that the committee to report to the House its consideration of the presidential reservation to the Health Laws Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 14 of 2018, and its approval thereof with amendments.
I go on to put the question for reporting. I put the question, which is that the committee do report to the House its consideration, President's reservation to the Health Laws Amendment, National Assembly Bill number 14 of 2018, and its approval thereof with amendments. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
to second the motion for agreement with the report of the Committee of the Whole House.
Honorable Amalwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I support.
I propose a question, which is that the House do agree with the committee in the same report. Is nobody? I then put the question, which is that the House do agree with the committee in the same report. Because many as that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as the contrary opinion say no. The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 10, motion.
Sorry,
report.
there's an intervention. What's your intervention?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wish to raise on a point of order, and I know, Speaker, but this is something that has to be done because of its public interest. And there have been some information going around, more so through SMSs from media houses that are considered to be actually credible media houses. And these messages are that the Public Investment Committee, you have directed us that we should not in any way whatsoever touch issues to do with the JKIA and KQ audit. Mr. Speaker, we need your guidance on this matter because I have been receiving telephone calls from all over. In fact, to the extent that it is now hampering our working. And the only communication that I have received as the chair of the committee is very, very specific, that it says, however, it would be important to note that the Public Investment Committee may deal with the matter if this was a query arising from the examination of audit reports and accounts of the Kenya Airports Authority or a special audit. I want it to be noted, Mr. Speaker, that this arose as a result of us examining their audits, and where we came to realize that Kenya Airways has to pay, by the end of 2018, 3.8 billion, and as of last week, that figure has reached 5 billion that Kenya Airways has to pay Kenya Airports Authority. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, a special audit that has already been signed by the relevant offices has already reached the Office of the Auditor General because of the public interest and the urgency and the importance of this matter. I took the liberty of actually having a phone conversation with the Auditor General who informs me as well. But unless you make this very clear so that the public can actually be aware, it will hamper the committees working on this. And I don't know whether the media have some form of information that we do not have as a public investment. Thank you.
Sorry, Honorable Nasir, did you say, sorry, because I was talking to the clerk, did you say that I have directed something?
Yes, according to the media SMSs that have been coming in, 411, this is from both the Standard Media and Capital, which are media houses that I hold with very, very high repute. But according to them, they are saying that you have instructed the Public Investment Committee and you have put us on the sidebar. So it is important for us to be able to get this, because it is actually affecting our day-to-day working, Mr. Speaker. And maybe with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I would actually like to be able to read Public Investment Committee loses bid to probe KQ JKIA proposal. House Speaker rules Transport Committee to hear matter. This is from Capital FM. And then equally, Mr. Speaker, from the Standard Media, Speaker Muturi directs Public Investment Committee to stop probe on planned JKIA to stop probe on planned JKIA takeover by KQ, says it is Transport Committee's mandate. This is from the Standard Media. And we would like to get your
See, honourable members, I don't know what we will do in this country if, because on matters of this nature, I'm sure those of you who have been with me since the 11th Parliament would know that communication of this nature on a matter involving two committees is not one in which you would communicate through SMSs. And I'm never in the habit of communicating through SMSs or even WhatsApp or whatever such other like medium. This is a matter that we would come and do a proper communication from the chair. I will not write a letter. I don't write letters. When if a matter of that nature arises, I don't even write a letter. So I don't know. Those must be some of these people who are they getting to this area of gutter or worse off? I think what President Trump calls manufacturers of fake news and such like, how would I direct that a committee stops its work? I have chaired that committee myself for 5 years. You are doing, and what you've done, you've given a report. So, or something which is actually in the other paper. So when has it been, when has the committee been stopped from, I don't know. Anyhow, no, members, I don't even need, there's nothing, what do I need to clarify? Safe to say, Honorable Nasir, that I have not in any way communicated to either your committee or any other committee. And I think it's also fair, those members of this House who have a habit of communicating to the media stories about themselves, please desist. And if a member has something, why not come to the floor of the House and say it? There's nobody who is prevented from. Indeed, because we don't want to spend valuable time discussing a known issue like that. But of course, the papers are at liberty to write what they think. Maybe if they have a way of being able to read what could be in the minds of others, certainly not mine. Certainly not mine. So I think let's just do as we had initially agreed, so that we can see whether they will still be right in continuing with their vitriol, because that's what it is. Let's do the next order. I have not issued any such instructions. Yeah, through whatever medium. Yes. Please proceed. Next order.
Order number 10, motion, report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the 2019-2020 budget policy statement.
Honour members, as of close of business yesterday, the following members are contributing this motion: the chair of the committee, the Honourable Ichongwa, the vice chair, Honourable Lesonet, and the Honourable John Bandi, the Honourable Mutunga Kanywidia, the Honourable Ochanda, the Honourable Rindikiri Muruidhania, as a balance, was on the floor and as a balance of 7 minutes. And the member is in the chamber. So you have a balance, or indeed you are the first on the screen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You did have 7 minutes, but I think I will conclude within 4 minutes so that we can have other members make their contribution. Mr. Speaker, As of yesterday, one of the main issues of my concern was the pending bills. And I'm very happy that the former minister is here with us, Waziri Kimunya, because at the start of the Kibaki administration, there was a very serious issue on the pending bills. And I'm happy that the committee has recognized the need to have a closing committee to look at the elements of the pending bills. You know, Mr. Speaker, there are so many things that are happening. They are accumulating pending bills, year in, year out, both at the national level and at the county level. Mr. Speaker, for us to be able to move forward is to have a clear statement on the status of these pending bills. Are they genuine pending bills or bills that have been created so that money can be utilized through the unorthodox manners? Mr. Speaker, this also follows the element of the stored projects. Mr. Speaker, there are so many stored projects. And every year, there is one or two projects that are stalling, which cannot be completed. I think what the committee should have done here is that they have called for an audit, yes, but I think we also need a special committee that can look at all the pending projects, because according to this number, it is alarming that we have more than 560 stored projects. Mr. Speaker, you know, the element of the laptop projects is a very serious matter in this country. We all liked it when it was beginning, but I think it wasn't seriously thought of at the beginning. So, Mr. Speaker, we should not really let this kind of thing happen again going forward. And that's why the committee had recommended last year that we need a performance matrix for each ministry, which seems not to be happening even this year. And in lieu of that, we can see that even next year, we'll end up with the same similar problem. Mr. Speaker, the element of accountability matrix for the Big Four agenda. Our president has a very serious concern on this Big Four agenda. And all of us need to support. But again, the Ministry of Treasury needs to clearly bring to the fore of the Kenyans that we need to have a way of the policy and accountability matrix so that Kenyans will know right from the beginning where we are coming from and where we want to go with the Big Four agenda. So, Mr. Speaker, those are my views. I like the report by the Budget and Appropriation Committee, but I think those matters of concern, they should be taken into account. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The next one on the screen is the Honorable Mbui. The next one appears to be Mwashako, member for Wundanyi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support the motion by the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the Budget Policy Statement 2019-2020. Mr. Speaker, this year we expected Treasury to give us a more detailed budget policy, not just to bring a document that has been a norm, a document that comes every February to this House, that does not spell in detail the policies that run, or the policies that we expect to inform the budget that will be, the budget estimates that will come in May, and the budget that will be presented to this House in June, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are a few things that we must, as a country and as a parliament, we must honestly deliberate and discuss. Number one, Mr. Speaker, I would want to speak about the issues of public debt. Mr. Speaker, year in, year out, Treasury brings in figures or quotes figures that do not agree with the economists that sit outside Treasury. Economists outside Treasury, every time you ask them about what is happening, they'll give you a very alarming numbers. But Treasury will always tell us that public debt that stands above 5 trillion shillings, or 50% of our GDP, they always talk about that we are within the accepted levels. Today they tell us we are net present value of our debt is 48%. However, Mr. Speaker, we also know that these figures may get manipulated so that they arrive to a figure that is below what the law provides. The law provides that NPV, net present value for public debt should not exceed 50%. But today, Treasury gives us a figure of 48%, and we know for sure that this country is not doing well. We are paying so much debt that we are not able to pay for other programs of government. Mr. Speaker, it is not right that every shilling we collect as revenue in this country, almost to every shilling we collect through KRA goes to service debt. In 2013, Mr. Speaker, our repayment for debt was at 0.5%. Today, we're talking about 2.5%, 5 times more. We're paying debt, a country is paying debt. Mr. Speaker, and we know for sure, we have been talking about the Big Four agenda that His Excellency the President has presented to the country, and we all of us embrace this Big Four, Mr. Speaker. But surprisingly, in the BPS, we are seeing figures for Big Four even coming down. Instead of the government telling us, Treasury telling us exactly how much resources they are allocating for the Big Four, we are seeing figures that are even coming down compared to this financial year, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it is clear that the Big Four agenda may remain a pipe dream, may truly remain a dream that will not be achieved. Mr. Speaker, when the BPS, Treasury presented the BPS to this House, that was tabled to this House, they talked about creation of employment. They talked about transforming lives. But Mr. Speaker, it is a pity that today, the Treasury is not coming up with policies that indicate that they're truly genuine in the matters of creating employment for our young people. We have items that can easily be produced locally, but a lot of items that are being imported, Mr. Speaker, that at a very low cost. And Mr. Speaker, let me talk about the Ministry of Agriculture. We have so many cartels in the Ministry of Agriculture, including, Mr. Speaker, the issues around importation of eggs. This country, we can produce enough eggs to feed this economy. However, Mr. Speaker, today we are importing eggs from as far as South Africa. And this is outrightly to tell you that the eggs that are coming from outside, they are not being charged duty, because if they are charged duty, Mr. Speaker, there's no way an egg in South Africa can be cheaper than an egg in Nairobi or in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, Treasury must come out and tell us what are these measures that are put in place so they can frustrate importation of items that we can produce locally, if truly, as a policy of government through the BPS, they are to create employment for young people. Mr. Speaker, my colleague has spoken about pending bills. It is true, Mr. Speaker, that businesses out there are crying, SMEs that the government every now and then speaks that they want to support. We have denied them the ability to have enough cash flows so that they can employ more of our young people, they can employ more Kenyans, because most of this debt is not being paid. We know our counties have the same issues. The national government has the same issues of public debt, pending bills, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that I think a commission needs to be set up that will investigate truly the problem we have on the issues of pending bills. Mr. Speaker, some figures have been thrown around. We have as billion that government is borrowing through, unorthodox means. Because having pending bills, Mr. Speaker, it means government has borrowed services and yet they are not able to pay, and that will definitely, if it was computed into the public debt, it will increase our public debt, Mr. Speaker. Before I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I want to believe that it is time for this country or for the president to declare corruption as a national disaster. It is a pity, Mr. Speaker, that every newspaper you buy, every headline of newspapers today in this country talks about corruption. Mr. Speaker, the country is losing billions of money. This country is losing a lot of resources into people's pockets. Mr. Speaker, I'm not certain that we have enough institutions are able to have capacity to handle the issues of corruption as we see on day-to-day basis. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I would like to urge the President to declare corruption as a national disaster, so that as a country, we can all of us focus on the fight against graft. Because this country today, we have pledges that the president made during campaigns. We have programs that we expect to run. Today, we are passing so many motions in this House, but nothing is being implemented because of budget constraints. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, the billions that we lose every year, we are told 30% of our 30% of our GDP is lost on corruption, Mr. Speaker. We urge the president to declare corruption as a national disaster, so that this parliament and every institution of government and every Kenyan can stand and speak against this vice. Because, Mr. Speaker, where I come from, we have roads that we have been promised that they will be done many years. We have a road starting from Bura, Mugange, Bundanyi, Mbale, to Mtomogoti, Mr. Speaker. Every now and then we expect that this road will be done. But to date, Mr. Speaker, we have been told that there are no resources, there is no budget for it. We have been told that we must, wait up to when. So, Mr. Speaker, corruption is eating this country, and we must, as a country, and all of us as parliamentarians, and even the committees of this House, Mr. Speaker, the committees of this House must stand.
Order. Notice change of chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I noticed that the chair has changed. Madam Speaker, I was speaking about declaring corruption as a national disaster. We have programs of this country, we have projects in this country that Kenyans are expecting implementation. But every time we push through, every time we're asking about what is happening on our roads, on our water projects, we've been told about Mzima 2 in Taita Taveta that will feed water to Mombasa, but particularly to give water to my residents of Taita Taveta County. To date, there is no mention in any government policy, BPS particularly, whether this project will get money. So, Madam Speaker, corruption will continue to kill a lot of projects that will help this country move forward. Madam Speaker, I stand to support. Thank you.
Very well, you stand to support. Next on my request list is a member for Kiminini, Wakungu Wamalo. Yes, Christopher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to register my disappointment of this report on BPS. Madam Speaker, ordinarily a BPS is supposed to highlight the priority programs for the government. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency the President of this country, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, has been all over talking about the Big Four. Madam Speaker, when you examine this BPS, there's no linkage at all with the Big Four. We are asking ourselves, the Big Four agenda, is it for public relations or the president means business, Madam Speaker? The kind of PPS we are discussing, Madam Speaker, it is a routine. Honorable Kimunya, when he was the minister at that time, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, of Treasury, during the time of President Mwai Kibaki. Madam Speaker, we salute that particular time because It is the responsibility of the government to ensure there is economic sustainability in the country. As we speak right now, Madam Speaker, people are languishing in poverty of the high cost of living. Madam Speaker, when President Mwai Kibaki took over power, the GDP of this country was growing at a negative rate. And he came up with ERC, the Economic Recovery Strategy, Madam Speaker, of wealth creation and employment. And we saw the GDP growth of this country growing from a negative to the positive of even 7, Madam Speaker. And he came in with a vision 2030. The BPS that we've been talking about, Madam Speaker, there's no linkage at all when you talk about this BPS. The budget policy statement is supposed to highlight the priority programs, and there must be a linkage, Madam Speaker, so that you try to operationalize. When you look at this report, it is not there. Madam Speaker, we expected the Treasury to give a feedback or a scorecard of the last year, because we had a BPS last year. What happened? Did they achieve the programs, the issues of the outputs? Nothing. This is routine. It is not adding value, Madam Speaker, and we are calling upon the CS Treasury and the PS to pull up their socks, Madam Speaker. They cannot continue taking Parliament for granted. This Parliament under presidential budget estimates, there is no linkage at all with this BPS. And this has been going on for a long time, Madam Speaker. If we are serious as a country and we want to grow economically, they need to develop a matrix, Madam Speaker, which is going to show the measurability. Madam Speaker, I remember some professors from Harvard University, Professor Kaplan and Professor Norton. They developed a model called the balance scorecard, Madam Speaker. I'm sure Honorable Kimunya knows. And when you look at the balance scorecard, the issue they said this, Madam Speaker, that if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. We are working in darkness. Treasury has not developed matrix that can, and indicators that you can be able to measure and see how are we moving as a country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as we speak, when you look at the public debt, Madam Speaker, for instance, the rule of thumb says, Madam Speaker, that when you borrow, particularly in a developing country, it should not go beyond the 50% of the GDP. When you look at this, Madam Speaker, this country, we are borrowing now 60% of the GDP. And it becomes very, very difficult, Madam Speaker, to sustain this public debt. And that's why you are finding, Madam Speaker, the cost of living in this country, it is very, very expensive. The Kenyans are suffering, the poverty everywhere. Madam Speaker, on the issue of corruption. Corruption in this country, Madam Speaker, it is now beyond. And when we looked at the reports from the Auditor General, it shows 30% of the GDP is going under wastage through corruption, Madam Speaker. And the President has been on the front line talking about fight against corruption. But we are not seeing any meaningful strategies in place to show that it's fighting corruption, Madam Speaker. Corruption are 3 components, Madam Speaker, and I'm happy the Chief Justice said it. The DCI, the DPP, and the judiciary. All of them must work in a collaborative framework. But we have blame game now. All the blame game is on judiciary. But the judiciary can only give judgment, Madam Speaker, based on the evidence that has been given. Madam Speaker, as we are here today, we are seeing corruption left, right, center. Right now, as we speak, when you look at the JKA, the scandal is that a serious scandal is going on, Madam Speaker. And we are calling upon the necessary committees to look at this matter objectively. Article 95 of the Constitution says, Parliament, National Parliament can debate, to resolve any matter of importance, Madam Speaker. When you talk of JKA, Madam Speaker, KAA, the public-private partnership that is being talked about, when you look at it, Madam Speaker, how the issue was brought on the floor, Madam Speaker, that it was a suggestion that came from KQ. We know it's a national carrier, but it's a loss-making organization, Madam Speaker, without even proper consultation, proper public participation of the staff of Kenya Ports Authority. Madam Speaker, these scandals, we must speak about them. We must lead from the front. We cannot breach water and drink wine, Madam Speaker. And we are saying this from the leadership of this country. We are very serious about this matter because Kenyans are suffering. We are focusing on small scandals, but the big scandals, we are saying, hey, go on. We must stand to be counted. Madam Speaker, as I move on, when you look at the pending bills, for instance, Madam Speaker, the pending bills are crazily high. When you go to the county governments, Madam Speaker, for instance, particularly those governors who are going out, the pending bills have gone beyond. Even some are fake, whereby they need to do proper auditing, Madam Speaker. And I know of some counties, they've brought somebody to audit, but for you to pay, there's a percentage they are demanding from that particular pending bills. Madam Speaker, this is the time that we must focus on the common mwananchi. These things should not be the same, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as we move on, another issue of the Big Four. There's a total disconnect between the national government and the county government. And we've seen the governor saying this. When you look at the priority projects or priority programs for the county government, it's totally different from the national government. The national government, we're talking of the Big Four. When you go to the county, whether in Northeastern, Western, or Nairobi, you find that the priority programs are totally different. It is important that they must align so that all the agenda, starting from the county government, it's aligned with the Big Four. The BPS itself has shown that it's not aligned to the Big Four. There's a lot of disconnect. And when there's a disconnect, Madam Speaker, you'll agree with me that there'll be a lot of wastages. This is the issue, Madam Speaker, that we are talking about. Madam Speaker, on the issue of food security. Food security is one of the great pillars of the 4 agenda. And for you to be food security secure, Madam Speaker, the issue of subsidized fertilizer is very important. I represent the people of North Rift. When you look at the proposals, Madam Speaker, the government is not serious that they are not going to provide subsidized fertilizer. My goodness. If you cannot supply subsidized fertilizer, how do you expect to be food security secure? These are the questions we're asking, and we need answers. Is the government serious of the Big Four, or the Big Four is just there for public relations exercise? These are the questions, Madam Speaker, we are trying to ask. Look at the universal health care. Madam Speaker, when it comes to the issues of universal health care, human resource is very, very critical. We are seeing the healthcare providers, they are always on strike. We are seeing the nurses are on strike. We need to put some mechanism in place, Madam Speaker, to address the issue of human resource and staff welfare for the purposes of universal health care. We've just been legislating issues of the health laws, Madam Speaker. And Honorable Nikal is here, he was a DMS. It is important that any country must be healthy. And I remember very well President Mwai Kibaki. I admire that president. I wish we had amended the constitution for him to continue. He used to speak less, but the economy was moving. There was money in circulation. We don't have money here. And that's why you want a referendum, so that ministers can come from this house, so that people like Ikimunya can go back to Treasury and maybe to fix some of the things, Madam Speaker. Because the people who are in Treasury not now, Madam Speaker, some of them are not elected. They are not even accountable to the common mwananchi. And when you talk about referendum, it's for the benefit of this country. And I'm humbly requesting you, honorable members, as we move on. We support the referendum. There's a BBI, Building Bridges Initiative. And as a National Assembly, we're also going to present.
Your time is over. Your time is over. Leader, you ready or I give it? Okay, because it's, of course, we pass it. Leader of majority.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, on the onset, I wish to commend the departmental committees and that of Budget and Appropriation Committee for their dedication in the budget-making process. Madam Speaker, the budget policy statement before this House has been prepared in accordance with Section 25 of the PFM Act of 2012. The law states, and I quote, Madam Speaker, if you allow me, the National Treasury shall prepare and submit to the Cabinet the budget policy statement for approval, and 2, the National Treasury shall submit the budget policy statement approved in terms of Section 1 to Parliament by the 15th of February each year. So the National Treasury has complied with the law in forwarding this budget policy statement. Madam Speaker, the National Treasury submitted the 2019 budget policy statement to the National Assembly as required by the PFM Act, and consequently departmental committees invited ministries, departments, and agencies to review the BPS. And we are indeed pleased with the fruitful deliberations that took place in finalizing this report, which today the House has the opportunity to discuss. Madam Speaker, the PPS contains both the macroeconomics policies and also the financial outlook regarding the revenue that is anticipated, the expenditure which is going to be anticipated, the borrowing that will finance the budget, and the expenditures as contained in this PPS, Madam Speaker, is in fourfold. Number one, the national government has been allocated 1.7 trillion. Parliament has been allocated 38.5 billion. The judiciary, 17.9 billion. And the county government shareable revenue is 310 billion. And Madam Speaker, I saw the Senate saying they're going to add 20 billion to the county. The question that begs is from where? This is a house that has the powers of budget making process. So it is us to add, it's not them to add. And Madam Speaker, the 310 billion is as a result of a meeting of the only body recognized in the county in law, the IBEC, chaired by the Deputy President, where all governors are. Madam Speaker, so the Senate is cheating, and they are also looking for relevance. And I saw today also the Minister for Interior has refused to go. Madam Speaker, if you ask me, the Minister for Interior, Minister for Defense, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Minister for Education outside the ECD, they have no business in the Senate. And East Africa, they have no business in the Senate. And no cabinet minister should be worried because they can't even impeach you. The only house, the only house that can impeach you is the National Assembly. So even if you defy, even if Matiang'i, you defy the Senate, that one they'll just discuss you, and I'm sure tonight the senators will go for me. But I don't. It is the law. It's not me. Even they can't impeach the president. It must start from here. So, Madam Speaker, the county government have been allocated 310 billion, and that's what they will get. We will go to mediation, but where is the money coming from? Madam Speaker, but I want to emphasize that Section 25, subsection 3 of the PFM Act states that the budget policy statement shall provide an overarching policy framework to guide the national government and the county government in preparing the budget. So the BPS, in fact, this report will guide the Minister for National Treasury to prepare now the estimates on revenue and expenditure. And the same will help the county governments to prepare their budgets following the financial year and over the medium-term policy. So, Madam Speaker, the adoption of this PPS will therefore provide the basis for which government will prepare a detailed budget, itemized, to be submitted again to Parliament by the end of April. So the Minister has the whole of March to prepare his budget. And end of April, he must submit. The Budget and Appropriation Committee, while reviewing the 2019 BPS, made some very useful observations and recommendations. I wish to make the following observations that the committee has made. One, Madam Speaker, is that the committee has proposed adjustment in the ceiling of 2 billion, whereas the government acknowledges that the adjustments is within the purview of Parliament. Section 39 of the PFM Act 2012 requires that any increase in expenditure should be offset by a similar reduction. That's why we are saying the budget must balance. So if Parliament increases, then they must find a way to cater for that increase, or they reduce from another sector. Two, Madam Speaker, it's important also to know these adjustments be made. The revenue projections in 2019 BPS are very conservative and have taken into account the current prevailing macroeconomic conditions, as well as the trends in the previous financial year. An increase in additional expenditure, Madam Speaker, will make government to either increase borrowing or adjust. But Madam Speaker, I need to raise this matter very seriously. Our debt level is now at the breaking point. And I think it's important for the National Treasury and government to diversify the various way of financing our budget. Maybe public-private partnership is the way to go. Madam Speaker, I really appreciate the comments given regarding the alignment of the budget to the Big Four plan and the medium-term policy thrust. The government will ensure that, I think in the report, detailed program and budget estimates for the financial year 2018-2019. Madam Speaker, the government is also working with county governments in the implementation of the Big Four. And that's why Honorable Chris was saying we cannot implement the 4 big agenda or plan without involving the county governments. Whether it comes to the universal health coverage is already under pilot in 4 counties. And this will be rolled out to the rest of the counties in due course. Madam Speaker, the government is also in the completion of the ongoing stall projects before commencing new projects. I think the Budget Committee and the Minister for Agriculture must allocate specific money for stall projects. We can't have ghost projects across the country. Projects, even ourselves, our CDF, we have no stall projects. So how can the national government have stall projects? So I think the government must have, the minister must have certain resources to restart those stall projects. And it's against this background that the president issued that executive order number 1 of 2019, in terms of coordinating the implementation of the national government programs and projects. Madam Speaker, the National Treasury, in their presentation, has established, they say they have established what they call Project Implementation Management Unit within the National Treasury that will coordinate and review all projects being implemented across the country by the national government. This measure, moving forward, Madam Speaker, will address issues relating to project prioritization, their funding, their implementation, and their completion. Fourth, Madam Speaker, in the presentation by the National Treasury, they say the government has issued guidelines on pending bills. Madam Speaker, this animal called pending bills is another corruption. Because if you go to the counties, you will find people who are saying a county has 2 billion pending bill. And if you go to the ground, there is nothing. So that 2 billion pending bill, these are the guys who are given letters of offer few months to the general election. Yes. So pending bills must be scrutinized, must be revetted, and only genuine ones be paid. We want genuine contractors and suppliers to be paid. But somebody is saying, I have done this, and I need 20 million. But when you go on the ground, there's nothing. So I think this animal called pending bills, both the national and the county governments must be very, very, particularly the county governments. Madam Speaker, I also wish once again to thank the honorable members for their cooperation and continued support to the government budget every year. And I want to assure them that the recommendation on the 2019 BPS will be considered during the finalization of the budget. That this report will not go in vain. That government and the National Treasury will use this report from the committees, then harmonized by the Budget and Appropriation Committee. It will form the central document in the finalization of the budget that will be submitted to the House at the end of April. Madam Speaker, with those few remarks, I beg to support and urge members to approve this report while ensuring that the proposed expenditure remains within the fiscal framework provided in the 2019 BPS. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Very well, you support the Leader of Majority. Honorable Junet, you are the next, and I am even aware you do not have your card, but we don't raise hands in the House. So you can use the dispatch box.
Madam Speaker, I didn't have my card, so I was thinking, you know.
You caught my eye very well.
Yeah, I wanted to catch your eye. Thank you. So thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand to support the budget policy statement. And Madam Speaker, under the new constitution is when this budgeting process has begun, and looks like the budget policy statement is becoming just like a routine business that the Treasury does and sends it to Parliament. Madam Speaker, the budget policy statement is a document which gives policy pronouncement underpinning the preparation of estimates of revenue and expenditure. To this end, the BPS is adopted by the House to guide the National Treasury and Ministries Department. And Madam Speaker, if you look at this budget policy statement, there is no policy contained in it. It's just a routine thing that the Treasury is trying to achieve. There is no major policy that is contained that has caught my eye in this policy budget statement, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm disappointed that over the years the budget policy statement has been brought before this House, but no tangible policy pronouncement has been proposed by the executive to address economic problems, Madam Speaker, bedeviling this country. Let me begin by addressing issues related to the plans pronounced by the government under the so-called Big Four agenda. Madam Speaker, the proposed expenditure allocation indicate business as usual approach. This budget policy statement, Madam Speaker, is just telling Parliament and doing things what we normally call business as usual. There is nothing new that contains in this budget policy statement. This report indicates that the bulk of the ministerial expenditure goes to education sector, 26%, energy, infrastructure and ICT sector, 22.3%, public administration and international relations sector, 14.9%, as well as governance, justice and law and order, 11.2%, and the total ministerial expenditure. However, critical sectors that are the drivers of the Big Four agenda, such as general economic and commercial affairs, as well as agriculture, rural and urban development, under which manufacturing, food security, and affordable housing are domiciled, are the least funded sectors, Madam Speaker, with a total allocation of 23.9 billion and 59.9. Now, if you have not given the Big Four agenda, Madam Speaker, enough money, how do you intend to achieve them? Unless they're just stories that you're telling people. You can only achieve those agenda when you fund them properly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is despite the promise under the budget policy statement that resource allocation will be aligned in projects and programs that are the drivers of the Big Four agenda. This is the clear case that the government is not walking the talk in the realization of the Big Four, unless it remains a mirage. There is no even accountability framework, Madam Speaker, to facilitate spending on the Big Four agenda. That is why big projects are failing. Kulalu Galana, Kokorer, Suji Dam, because there is no proper accountability framework that were put in place to make sure that those big agenda spendings are accounted for, Madam Speaker. You just allocate resources, 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion, you want to do such a big dam, but there is no accountability framework that's in place to make sure that this money is spent in the right manner, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Leader of Majority 2 weeks ago tabled a report showing how projects have stalled. I take note that this list was not exhaustive, and therefore the executive never informed this House accordingly. I'm sure it was just some of the projects that have stalled. But Madam Speaker, I also note that many projects which were outlined as flagship projects under the Vision 2030 and the second medium term were never completed. One of them, Madam Speaker, a case in point of those projects is the construction and equipment of forensic laboratory by the State Department of Interior. Madam Speaker, the CID now is in top gear investigating many cases. But they don't have even a forensic laboratory, Madam Speaker, to do that work. And that thing has been pending many years. And it was part of the Vision 2030 flagged project. Madam Speaker, how do you intend to have a top-notch investigation when you don't have even a laboratory to do the work, the investigation that you intend to do, and you are not spending in that direction? You are spending in other directions that have no benefit to this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, these projects were the foundation of the envisaged growth of 10% in the 2030 vision. When those projects were done, we expected the economy to grow at 10%, Madam Speaker. But this economy now, even after the revision of how those things are calculated, it has stagnated at between 5 and 6%, 5.6%. It's unable to move. It is stuck there. It looks like it has lost energy now anymore. It can't move upwards, maybe downwards only.
Order. Just a moment. Honorable Keter, are you okay? I can see you are rising, pointing up, pointing sides.
We are freezing, Madam Speaker.
Yes, just honorable, let me hear.
We are in the deep freezer.
But he does not need to act in the house. It's not a drama place. Honorable Keter, let me hear what you have to say. Because he's pointing up, it could be in...
And also he's waiting for the KAA matter.
Yes, just give him the mic, but we don't do that. What I'm just trying to caution you.
And that is the reason why you thought I was acting.
Yes, I thought you were acting there.
The machines are not working. We are freezing, Madam Speaker. It's very cold. I think the regulators of the AC must improve.
Very well. And I can see you are in a suit and a coat. It's taken care of. Yes, carry Honorable.
Madam Speaker, the National Treasury has always lived a lie by giving pessimistic economic projections. The projections given in this BPS 2019 and medium term are not anchored in any major policy, Madam Speaker, of government and project implementation, but they are still based on factors beyond control of government like weather. The government is telling you that the economy will do well if the weather condition is going to be good, Madam Speaker. So they are living in the hope of hopes that if God can favor us and there will be rain next year, then this economy will do well. But if there will be no rain and the weather will be bad, then the economy will be bad also. Madam Speaker, what kind of statement is that, policy statement? In this era of 21st century, that the government is still relying on rainfall to make sure that the economy does well. Madam Speaker, it just shows you how Treasury has still remained in the archaic ways of doing things, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, some ongoing projects, especially under infrastructure and industry, which could have actually boosted economic growth, have experienced delayed implementation, inadequate resource allocation in previous years, and there is no indication on how any prevailing challenge will be addressed to ensure the targets of 2019 and 20 are met. Madam Speaker, in my conclusion, an overrated growth projection impacts on our debt position, expenditure amongst macroeconomic fundamentals. This loophole has always been used by the National Treasury to give incorrect position on our debt. Madam Speaker, we have spoken about this issue of debt now for many years, from last parliament to this parliament. And you are told we are using the GDP to set our ceilings on how much we can borrow. Madam Speaker, I want this House to change that rule and put specific provisions in the Public Finance Management Act, and we give the government a ceiling, numerical ceiling, that you cannot go beyond 6 billion, how much are they borrowing? 6 trillion. It will end there. But now, this one you are told, oh, they change figures. No, we are at 49% of the GDP, when actually they are at 60 or 65%. But they're the ones who cook the figures there. You can't know how much it is. I think this House will come up with a law that says this is the ceiling. Even when you go borrow from the bank, Madam Speaker, they give you a ceiling, they tell you you can only get 100,000. Above that you can't get. What stops us as a House from coming up with that kind of mechanism that we tell, after all, the money that is being borrowed on your behalf, on behalf of your children? And Madam Speaker, To conclude, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker,
Honorable Jeanette, just to be in procedures, to follow procedures, there's a point of order by Leader of Majority. However, you had only 1 minute. Yes, Leader of Majority. What
Chair, it's not even a point of order, but I really wanted to tell Honorable Jeanette that, in fact, the PFM Act obligates the House that every time the minister wants to borrow, the House must give an approval. So next time he's coming to borrow, please be on the lookout.
So, Leader of Majority, are you informing him or is out of order?
I'm informing him. So it's not out of order.
Does
He's a
he
good man.
accept to be informed?
He's a very good
No, Madam Speaker, I agree with the majority leader, is right. But you see, by the time he's coming to borrow the Treasury chief, he has already calculated some figures that our GDP, our debt ratio is 50%, is 48% to the GDP. So we have 2% to go up. I am saying we write it in black and white that your ceiling is 5 trillion shillings. If don't come here, if you go beyond that, that's the point I was making, Madam Speaker. We amend, yes. So, Madam Speaker, to conclude that once again, BPS is a tool that guides the government in preparing estimates. Over the years, this House has made resolutions.
And you have 1 minute.
No,
your balance is 1 minute.
Hawajawakisha?
It's because of the interruption.
Madam Speaker, unless you don't want me to speak in the House, there is something here that normally goes on. So, Madam Speaker, to conclude, the county government, Madam Speaker, the amount of this, the amount of, Madam Speaker, the amount of corruption that goes on in the counties, Madam Speaker, the devolved corruption, the billions of shillings that are lost in the counties cannot be overestimated, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, look at what's happening. Nowadays, you just hear this county has lost 2 billion, 3 billion. You never hear 1 million or 3 million or 10 million. So, Madam Speaker, we must come up with a mechanism to address, even though even national government here, Comorer and Aror is now heading to 90 billion. But today I was told, no, what we lost is only 7 million. That means we have not lost a cow, we have lost a condor. That's what we are being told today, that you have only lost a donkey. So, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, that corruption in the county must be addressed once and for all if this country is to achieve the Big Four agenda. Money is being devolved, and you're just stealing, you're just eating. You know, 80% goes to recurrent expenditure. How are we going to develop this country?
Now, Honorable Millie, unless it's something general, the Honorable Jeanette has already finished his debate, and I'm sure your time will come. Honorable members, as I order for the Honorable Keter's issues to be addressed, then I also order that the machines are cleared in a way to ensure that members are able to. The Honorable Member for Kipipiri, a Member of Parliament we've seen many times carrying the briefcase, and I'm sure he's rich and he has a lot of experience in this.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support the report of the committee and to commend them for the work that they did. Indeed, and indeed all the committees that sat over the weekend to go through this statement and try to make sense of it, and because of its importance as the basis for the budget estimates that will be coming here. And Madam Speaker, even as you go through it, I'm not sure that the authors of the document have been listening to the political leadership. Because when you look at the manifesto, when you look at what the leadership is talking about in terms of the intentions, in terms of the political pronouncements that have been made, and then you look at the BPS, you see a total discrepancy. And I'll give examples. One of the key enablers of the Big Four is the technical training of our youth. The youth who will go and work within the manufacturing sector, who will be constructing these houses, who will be helped within the revitalization of agriculture and food security. And these youths are to be trained through our technical and vocational education institution, the TVETs. Now, we've done very well in terms of recruiting the youths. And it's expected there will be 262,000 trainees within our technical training institutions across the country. The leadership has also gone ahead and said each of these youths will be given a capitation of 30,000 shillings and help 40,000 shillings. So total training cost of each of these trainees is estimated at 70,000 per year. Now, if you multiply that 70,000 times the 262 expected, you're talking of there should be a provision or an indication of how 18.3 billion will be provided within the estimates. But when you look at the BPS, it's talking of 3 billion. So where will the 15 billion come from, right? Because it's either we are telling the youths that they'll get capitation when there's no capitation provided. If it's not here, if it's not captured in the BPS, if it's not captured in the estimates, how do we expect that the youths who join our technical training institutions will get their capitation from? Now, you look at the post-training department within the Ministry of Education, and I'm just looking at those two as examples of some of the discrepancies. We've been telling the youth that on finishing their training, they'll actually get apprenticeship programs and they'll get some stipend. The total budget allocation for the department that is supposed to be oversighting, providing that, is only 165 million, which is mainly for administration and for doing some administrative duties, mainly. Where is the 800 million that's required for at least the first batch of trainees to get apprenticeship allowances? Now, so when you now look at some of those things, Madam Speaker, it's creating a situation of perhaps that we are moving into business as usual. The BPS that was there last year, just change a few figures, roll it, give it to Parliament to approve because Parliament is going to approve anyway. But does this provide the proper basis for actually then preparing our budget estimates? Because as committee notes on page 19, that once we approve this today, it will provide the basis for the estimates that will be coming here. But if 15.5 billion in just one ministry is missing, surely what are we talking about in terms of how realistic will the budget be, given that the basis on which it's prepared, itself is shaky? Madam Speaker, I just want to also echo the sentiments of the committee in terms of these stalled projects. But what I'm worried about is obviously that once we have stalled projects, and we had lots of them in the late the headquarters, there was lots of buildings and projects that were scattered all over the country, because it's obviously that if it's stalling because of reallocation of monies to other priority areas, then we are basically saying we are not serious in the first place in terms of identifying that we need to do this project. And even the ones we are starting, how sure are we that in 2-3 years' time they will not become stalled projects? So the Treasury and government needs to show us some seriousness in terms of whether these projects were desired in the first instance. And if they were, as a parliament, we should be insisting that before we commit new projects, let's at least complete the stalled ones. If you have money that's just lying between half-finished buildings, you're basically losing in two ways. You got a building where you put so much money, you're not going to use it, and you're not going to complete it. So whatever is lost, whatever is spent, you might as well consider it lost. You got contractors who are halfway through the process. You have to terminate those contracts. It becomes expensive. You'll be paying interest on the time that is taking. And you may remember, for those of you who were there 10 years plus, the stalled NSSF project, you had just a crane there for ages. If you look at the amount of money that the government will have to pay as part of reviving some of those projects. It's quite a bit. And especially when our youth are complaining they don't have jobs, there's no money circulating in the economy. Part of the contributors to this, contraction of the economy is this jobs, this stalled project, because nobody is being paid, so money is not flowing into the economy, and as we now are restarting the new project. So if the reason, as we are reading in the report, is because that government has now decided to rationalize and move expenditure from these projects to new pet projects, then I think we are not, it's not exactly the kind of thing that would inspire confidence in the management of our resources. And I would really urge that we look at these things and as Parliament insist that no new projects will be started until the stalled projects have actually been completed, or we get not just a report tabled in Parliament that these are the projects, but what we need is an action plan of how exactly these are going to be completed. We know there are also issues.
Order. Honorable Member, they call him Songo. You know what you just did. Can you go back and do the right thing? Honorable members, we must watch procedures of this house. And for that matter,
thank you.
Again, yes, let me make this also communication so that we don't also teach the first timers, I'm not going to call it bad manners, but to be out of procedure of the House. We are honorable members and we must follow our own standing orders, including making speeches or, the language to use. And I must refer you to standing order number 77, where it speaks about the language to use in the House. And this 77, 1 and 2, that all proceedings of the House shall be conducted in Kiswahili, English, or Kenyan Sign Language. And 2 is a member who begins a speech in any of the languages provided for under paragraph 1 shall continue in the same language until conclusion of the member's speech. And so that members may not want to refer or make a reference to the other members. For this one, I want to quote the Honorable Junet, who did refer to in his speech that members, let us observe our own standing orders so that the others may not make a reference from us. So, Honorable Kimunya, please carry on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and for guiding especially the newer members. It's a process, and I'm sure they'll catch up at some point. Madam Speaker, looking through in terms of pending bills, and I'm glad some members did mention that we found pending bills again in the order of 519 billion in 2002. But when we started a committee to close these bills and to audit these bills, it transpired that the total pending bills were worth only like 1 billion shillings or less. So it just might be that we are, and I agree with Majority Leader, that we actually need a thorough audit of some of these things. In those days, one of the things I kept on seeing is people saying, in fact, they're bringing a bill of 5 billion shillings for the construction of Treasury Annex. And I'm wondering, where is this Treasury Annex? And I'm standing in the Treasury, and I can't see a new building that has been constructed within the neighborhood of the Treasury, right? So there could be lots of all these things because people are thinking that they can put money around, then go to court and get injunctions and force arbitration and get payments made. So we need to be very careful on these pending bills, and I agree that we need to have a committee that will close or at least investigate them, and before payments are made, this House should actually be put in the picture. Similarly, one of the things I like at page 15 at the top is a recommendation by the committee about the need to harmonize the outputs, the desired outputs with the resources that we are putting. Right now, like I said, we have outputs that have been there, but when you now look at the money required, it's actually not been there. I wish we had more time to actually interrogate these things, that I would like to encourage members. Between now and the time we actually come for the budget proper, let's relook at the BPS. So when we look at the budget when it comes, then we are able to identify some of those things so that we can get some seriousness into our budgeting process, and it just doesn't become a ritual where we just get a report here, we pass it, the committee sits, we pass, the other one comes, we pass, and then at the end of the day, we end up with, we are not even sure what we wanted to achieve.
Very well, Rich, the experience. Members, I confirm that I have 15 requests, but from where I sit, I know that the screen may not be quite in place. So, like it shows Honorable Mbowe is in the house, and I'm sure he's consulting. The screen is still hanging. Then I go to the Honorable nominated member, the Honorable Dual Adhiambo. Daktari.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you also for all those titles. Daktari might be in contravention of the language policy we talked about. Professor could also come in. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I'd like on the outset to thank the Budget Appropriation Committee for a thorough job looking at the report. And indeed, Madam Speaker, as has already been indicated, to thank all the committees as well. As I support the report, Madam Speaker, I am particularly encouraged by the observation in the report of the key challenge, given that what we would look for in a budget policy statement is clear policy guidelines, policy framework, policy directions, and as has been pointed out by very many members, Madam Speaker, an effort to ensure that as we will be looking for estimates, budget estimates in April, we will have had a clear, convincing presentation of what the direction and what, therefore, the framework should be. Madam Speaker, we can see that it is clearly observed in the report that whereas we find in the BPS 2019 projects that were implemented in the year 2018-2019, there is a lot of provision of extensive programs and information, but we do not have key outputs and performance indicators, and the status of the current projects is not clear. And therefore, Madam Speaker, as I support this, I wanted to really just start by indicating that it is important that when we are looking at a program-based budgeting, that we ensure that resource allocation is anchored on outputs in order that we can not only reduce resource wastage, but that there can be a clear and convincing message to us in the House and to the public in general that we are taking the responsibility of matching resources to the direction that we would like to take the country seriously. And therefore, Madam Speaker, I would also like to join other honorable members who are looking at the budget policy statement, sees repetition and routine pronouncements and a manner in which there doesn't seem to be recognition by Treasury that when we are looking at budget policy statement, we are not only looking at prioritization, but we are much more importantly concerned that those areas that are seen to be the drivers of the economy, those areas that are reflective of areas where citizens are experiencing challenges are addressed. Madam Speaker, when we look at the areas that are clearly not only seen to be critical in the Big Four agenda, but informing areas of need where we would be able not only to address issues of food security, but where we would also, by way of ensuring that we address issues such as universal health care and manufacturing, we look at the budget policy statement, and Madam Speaker, we do not see a clear matching of the pronouncements, the policy, and the resource allocation. I am, Madam Speaker, particularly concerned because, Madam Speaker, in Sierra County, where I come from, we have a semblance of opportunity for the public to come and to review what they feel are pertinent issues and to suggest what they think would be the direction to go, and in particular to speak to those who they feel they have given a voice in the National Assembly to look at. And Madam Speaker, when looking at the budget policy statement, I'm concerned because about 3 weeks ago at this gathering, which, Madam Speaker, for the purposes of giving it correct record for Hansard, is called Bunge la Wananchi, I was tasked by public when they indicated that they are extremely frustrated and disappointed that they are not going to benefit as they had been doing before on subsidized fertilizers. And it was very instructive, the manner in which, in this conversation, we had Kenyans of different ages really indicating that if we are not going to provide this kind of subsidy, then clearly what is going to happen is that we are not going to have farmers coming up with the kind of produce that we had before, and it's going to spiral into a situation where we not only fail to have food security, but we will find that the increasing domestic violence, frustration, the challenges that we can see day in, day out that are reflected when lives of those who are in families are taken, sometimes by their own hands, will continue. And so, Madam Speaker, as I support the report, I also would want to really call upon the House, and in particular to indicate that it is good that we do not allow Treasury to accept a semblance of, if you like, just normalizing a way in which a very critical role that can help the country out of the hopelessness that we seem to be sinking into can continue. And Madam Speaker, when we look at the area of corruption as well, we do not see clear policy statements to address corruption. And yet, when we look at what is happening in the country today, we are beginning to be a country that is very comfortable talking about billions being lost, and we are more or less training not only our children, but other citizens, that it is not a big issue when money is lost. Because when you start talking about billions, as if you are really talking about thousands of shillings, then you send the message that in our country, we are demonizing honesty. We really do not think professionalism or technical work or advice is important. Integrity seems to be something that is only left for those who don't seem to be aware that what you can get now is what will count, because the manner in which we are going, we really don't know what tomorrow holds. And in a way, we therefore not only continue to reinforce this sense of hopelessness, but as a matter of fact, normalize corruption. And so, Madam Speaker, I would like to emphasize that we would want to see clearer policy statements and directions. And indeed, as we look at the report, it is very clear that we are clearly indicating that we do not want to be silent on tax waivers, which seems to be something that happens because we don't have very clear policy directions, that when we are looking at pending bills and we look at the manner in which, Madam Speaker, we had in our transition from the national to the county government, a more or less duplication of officers, and you still seem to have the same wage bill at the national level that would reflect that some of the officers that were deployed in the countries through line ministries are also still in office. And so, Madam Speaker, as I conclude, I would particularly just once more want to suggest that we look at ensuring clear policy direction. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Very well. The Honorable Keter, however, you may not be able to use your mic. Yes, move to the other or the dispatch box. You can come to the dispatch box, please. Honorable member. Honorable members, you're aware some of the mics, they are being worked on.
Thank you, Madam.
You don't do like we are in the
Thank you, Madam
Yes.
Speaker. From the onset, I really want to say, listening to most of the contributions by members from yesterday to date, I think we're living a lie in terms of what we were expecting from a budget policy statement. Madam Speaker, this is a very key or a fundamental issue which touches on one of our biggest roles as members of parliament, the budget making process. And I believe we should be adding some input or improving in a way we making contributions that can change the living standards of our people. Madam Speaker, it is rather unfortunate that every time we sit in this parliament and then we hear stories of coming up with policies that are not realistic in terms of the challenges that our Kenyan people are facing. Madam Speaker, when you see the estimation of revenue collection that the Treasury is expecting every year, they have a big disconnect from the reality, because they talk about huge figures, after almost 2 trillion, but the real figures that we get are below 1.5 trillion. Sometimes it gets even below. Last year, we passed some laws that were going to mean that Kenyans were to pay more taxation in terms of the fuel cost. And then you come after 6 months or 7 months down the line, there is no improvement in terms of revenue collection, because the same taxation that we did in over fuel consumption on fuel cost is not impacting positively to our economy. And you see, I've had many comments from members of parliament saying that there are issues to do with a lot of foreign debt. We have borrowed so much, but the problem is not just about borrowing. It is the wastages and the leakages that we get out of the borrowing and the mispriorities. We don't prioritize in terms of what to invest. When you borrow, like I remember I talked about in the 11th Parliament about the railway, where I believe in the standard gauge railway, but I was against the costing. There are amounts that you need to use in any project. Kenya is a country where every cost, so long as you address it is about public resources, anything is very expensive. I've heard of dams that government is planning to use millions of dollars, hoping 20 million Kenya shillings, 25 million Kenya shillings to construct a dam. Private individuals have constructed dams worth less 5 times or 10 times the cost that we're using. So it is sad that every time we are using public resources, everything is coming to be very expensive. When you talk about the stalled projects, there are so many projects which are stalled. The reasons, one, people want to launch new projects because they're benefiting from kickbacks. People want to launch new projects because they want to change their dream every year. We must believe in what we're believing this year, and we have a vision. We have a vision 2030 where nobody knows how so far we have implemented it. If we were to do an audit in terms of how much we have achieved as a country with the Vision 2030, it would be sad to realize that we are way 15, 20 years, and we are just about to get to 2030. It's about 12 years, from 11 years from now. Madam Speaker, most of these toll projects, again, has been the challenge that we've been having with the resources. We must agree and live a reality that this country is broke. We must start believing in that because we are living a lie. CDF, so far we have managed to receive 30 million, 31 as of yesterday, out of over 100 million. It is less than 30%. What is happening? We don't know. Most county governments have received less. I heard the majority leader spoke about the pending bills, where huge corruption cases are coming through the pending bills. Some are genuine cases, which is contributing a lot to do with the circulation of resources or the cash flow that we are experiencing at the moment. It is affecting directly the SMEs. Many business, small-scale enterprises are collapsing because of resources. Bankers are auctioning contractors. Factories are closing down. Many Kenyans are losing jobs because factories cannot proceed with the type of environment that we are in. We are in an economy where everybody is feeling it, both the rich, the middle class, and the poor. The farmers are complaining left, right, and center. Every sector in the farming is collapsing. And that is the reason why, and I want to support my colleagues, who have said there is a big disconnect between what the national government, what is in the manifesto of Jubilee, and what the Treasury are proposing, and what the Kenyans are facing. If you talk about the Big Four, you have to address manufacturing because it is one of the agendas of the Big Four. Manufacturing, when you see about in this policy, the policy statement, nothing is coming up that is going to improve in terms of manufacturing. If you talk about healthcare, it is not just about NHIF that is going to address universal healthcare. It is bigger than NHIF. We must have a universal healthcare that is sustainable, that is something that we can meet the test of time. If it is about the question of food security, let us see government taking responsibility in terms of improving the fertilizer distribution to farmers. Let us have subsidized fertilizer to allow farmers to use less of their inputs to achieve more of their output. If you talk about the other, all the Big Four, we don't see how it is replicated here. There is a big disconnect. We've talked about the public debts. We have borrowed so much. We are in a whooping 5 trillion, which is an equivalent of, if you were to make an assumption that Kenyans are about 50 million, then it will mean that every Kenyan, including the children who are born today, owe a foreign debt of 100,000. It's crazy. A one-day child is 100,000 bill to sort. And what would he do with the 5 trillion? Nobody knows. There is, I was reading from there is a team which were discussing about the viability of the SGR. And they came up with some costing, saying it will cost someone to have his cargo or a 40-foot container from Mombasa to Nairobi. It will cost them about 140,000, which is way too much. 50,000 to get it to Nairobi, but the handling cost is increasing. Most of them are resorting now to use our roads to get there, and it will delay again because of the challenges that they are facing from Mombasa to Nairobi. As a country, we need to see on how we need to approach the corruption cases so that we reduce the leakages, how we can improve on the revenue collections. And then again, we stop living a lie and have a budget that is strictly addressing how much we can collect. Let us not dream of other nations to give us resources to address our budgeting process. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Very well. Are you supporting or you're not supporting the reports of the budget? You must go into record, honourable members. You don't support it?
Put it on. Okay.
Yes,
I'm
please.
supporting.
You're supporting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Honourable Millie Odhiambo, I can see you are both. You want to contribute to this or your own intervention? Yeah, because I could see you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I actually didn't intend to speak to this. I'm a member of budget.
Okay.
And sometimes I prefer to give other members a chance.
Thank you. I remember you were on intervention before the Honourable. Yes, thank you. The Honourable Kiari, a member for Dagoret South. Waweru.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity. And I'll have to start by saying that I actually think the job that has been done by the committees is commendable. Madam Speaker, the budget process, to my mind, is a most important business that this House transacts, if not critical. And we are here starting the process of the budget cycle. And Madam Speaker, as we do this, we are all alive to the fact that economic alarm bells are going off incessantly around this country. Madam Speaker, we have to, at one point, pause and reconsider what it is that we do in this House and ask ourselves whether we are here to do things that are exercises in futility or to do things that are mundane and routine every year, passing papers in this House. Why I say that, Madam Speaker, is because at a time like this, when we know what the economic situation in this country is, at a time like this, when we know what the global outlook is like, where we know that there are countries that are going to be almost receiving sanctions, countries that are very critical to the economy of this country, oil-producing countries that are facing sanctions at this time, Madam Speaker, we'll also have to think about how we do our budget in this country. Madam Speaker, I think it is going to be important that we unpack this report that has been presented to us. And to my mind, I think there's still time for the Treasury in this country to do better than what they have presented to us. Madam Speaker, as we speak, we are talking of growth projections that have been captured in this budget policy statement. These projections, Madam Speaker, are not backed by any policy shifts, any major policy shifts that we can write home about. In fact, Madam Speaker, we are seeing the same exact things that we were seeing last year. Madam Speaker, they are telling us that they are surrendering the projections or the growth projections of this country to the whims of things that are beyond their control. They're talking about things like weather. That our projections as this country, growth projections of this country, are going to be dependent on matters that are beyond their control. What I think the lawyers call force majeure. Matters of God. Issues that they have no control about. However, when we dig deep to look at any policy shift that they are proposing to us, or even an idea of how they are going to change how we implement projects in this country, this report is devoid of such. Madam Speaker, we all know that the economy is driven by certain key sectors. Sectors like infrastructure, sectors like industry. When we look at what they're proposing here in this budget policy statement, we are not seeing any tangible improvement in resource allocation to these very critical sectors, Madam Speaker. So we tend to wonder whether the Treasury is serious presenting such a budget policy statement to Parliament, and whether Parliament is going to rise to the occasion and say for once, as Parliament, we are going to do the right thing, not only for our country, but also for our people, but even for some of us who are really in support of our president, we are going to do the right thing so that he is not shamed by a legacy that is littered by some of these things that are going to be the product of such a budget policy statement. Madam Speaker, when you unpack this budget policy statement, you realize that we get into the same cycle of debt problems, Madam Speaker. It's at this point that as this House, we'll have to go back to our committees and interrogate the budgets that are coming from our departments, from our ministries, from our sagas, and say to ourselves that it does not take an economist or a former minister like Mheshimiwa Waziri Kimunya here to know the basic tenets of an economy. Madam Speaker, there are some irrefutable laws in economy that you cannot change. One is that you have to live within your means. Madam Speaker, we will go and draw a budget of 3 trillion Kenya shillings, Madam Speaker. Whereas in reality, maybe all we can afford is probably 1.7 trillion Kenya shillings. Let us go back to these ministries. Let us go back to these sagas. Let us go to these departments and tell them that we have to prioritize those things that are going to work towards building a Kenya that is sustainable, Madam Speaker. Because when we talk about debt levels of this nature, then we are not working for posterity. Madam Speaker, we're in the era of the Big Four agenda. In fact, it is the Marshall Plan that is going to be the midterm policy that drives us towards the issues that we were looking towards Vision 2030. Looking at this budget policy statement, Madam Speaker, it suffers the twin tragedy of one, lack of an overarching framework. We cannot tell what the agenda is clearly, what the strategies are, what the tangible policies which would come with actually a result matrix are for this Big Four agenda. That is one tragedy. The second tragedy, Madam Speaker, is that there is no clear investment on this Big Four agenda. The BPS 2019 does not tell us how they are shifting resource allocation to housing, to health, to infrastructure, Madam Speaker, and to industry. We realize that there could be marginal additions of budget allocations to some issues that are geared towards the Big Four. But in the real sense, Madam Speaker, we are not investing in the Big Four if this is what we're going to go with as a budget policy statement. Madam Speaker, this is a country of young people, a country that has a mean age of 18. Madam Speaker, this government has promised the young people that they are going to be enabled to run their own businesses so that they don't just depend on employment. Madam Speaker, we have other affirmative funds that would help our women and marginalized people. This government has promised a bank that is going to consolidate all these affirmative acts where we can all draw from as the youth of this country, as the women, as other people seeking affirmative funds. But in this budget policy statement, Madam Speaker, we do not see anything on the status of the establishment of the Biashara Bank as promised by the government. Madam Speaker, as we speak today, Uwezo Fund sits on its own, Youth Enterprise Development Fund sits on its own, Women Enterprise Development Fund sits on its own, the Kenya Industrial Development Bank sits on its own, fragmented, all trying to do the same thing of empowering our people who need affirmative action. Madam Speaker, we're in a country where we are presiding over, as Parliament, a myriad of what you would call potential white elephants. 554 stalled projects, Madam Speaker. We look at this budget policy statement and we cannot find any clear roadmap or even proposal on how we are going to revive these projects, Madam Speaker. So what are we presiding over as a Parliament? And I want to say that these issues will end up at the door of every member of parliament every Monday that you go to your office. Madam Speaker, when pesa za wazee, the cash transfers, are not remitted to the old people because we cannot meet our targets, it will come to the door of the member of parliament. When we cannot meet the promises of capitation and financing of our TVET students, they will end up at the door of our speaker. When our projects monies for CDF are delayed, Madam Speaker, it will end up at the door of the members of parliament. Madam Speaker, as we speak right now, with the slow economy, projects are stalled, critical projects, roads in our constituencies, which are not being developed. So, Madam Speaker, my point is two-pronged. That one, we do expect something more serious from Treasury, and secondly, as a parliament, we need to budget within our means. Let us dare for once to do what is right and budget for a budget that we can accommodate as a country. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Very well. The member for Seme.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity. Madam Speaker, budget policy statement is an important, extremely important document. It looks at the past, how we have used the resources that we had in government programs and what we obtained. It sets a future of how we are going to spend and on what programs we are going to spend. And it also sets the ceiling of what we are likely to spend. It therefore needs extreme scrutiny when we are looking at it. I must congratulate the committees of the House and the Budget Committee for the work they have done in just 14 days. But what I noted, Madam Speaker, is it was really stressful. Committees were running all over, trying to be in the House and trying to be in the committees. And my suggestion, we may need to look at our standing orders so that in the first week of the budget policy statement, we actually don't have sessions in the House. I remember members of our committee trying to contribute to how dead bodies should not be trained in hospital while we are waiting to look at the budget policy statement on health. Something which, if we solved that problem, would not be a problem. Then in the second week, we would then have the committees reporting to the budget committee, and the House would resume. That's something I would recommend we would look at it. Madam Speaker, I will not mind repeating. When the budget policy statement was to come, what everybody was looking at is where are the big four? Everybody has said they didn't see. We didn't see. And I think that actually is tragic because we are all geared to big four. We are supporting the big four, but we don't see it. For example, if you look at the area of agriculture, or let's say manufacturing, I would expect manufacturing in this country to be actually agro-based because that is the only way we can start serious manufacturing. And it will also spur the agriculture sector and actually create tremendous employment. To just mention a few, when I looked at sugar, I know there's a lot of issues going on, but again, you didn't see it much in the statement. If you look, I look at cotton, a huge thing. There was absolutely no, I know this is devolved, but there would be policy and direction in funding. How do we revive cotton? All I saw was actually some money going to Rivertex and looking at the seeds. This revision needs, where are the ginaries? Where are the motivation of the farmers to go and plant cotton so that the ginaries, because even at the ginaries level, when you have cotton lint, then you know what to do with it. Madam Speaker, I didn't see that. When I looked at even the area of irrigation, to just mention a few places in Nyanza that I know of, Oluch Kimera, the Nyando irrigation, the Lower Kuja, in all cases, the funding that we are seeing were to a large extent coming from partners. Only a paltry were indications. How can you actually go ahead without looking at that? Fisheries, we are importing fish from China. And they say that actually the best tilapia is Lake Victoria tilapia. We are in the era of cage farming. I know this is devolved, but as members here have said, there is no way we are going to go forward unless national policies and strategies are linked what is happening to the counties. And that is what we wanted to see here. Madam Speaker, health. We are all saying UHC, Universal Health Cover. We all support it. But what we are implementing now, we did not see, or I did not see, how you want to move from the pilot in the 4 counties to roll out in the whole country. And what we are doing is actually tax funded, where you go and get treated level 1 to 4 for free. Now, when we are going to roll this out within the next 1 year, how are you going to fund it? And we had all hoped that we would use insurance and NHIF. NHIF now, whatever its other problems, is not in this pilot. When we now roll out, how shall you fit it into the rollout without looking at that? I am not convinced that you have enough money to actually give free health care without insurance element. So, Madam Speaker, these are just a few, and we hope that when we get to the estimates, some of these will have been corrected. There is time, comments were made, and so we can collect that. We also are on program-based budget. But what we noted, at least in our sector, was that there's a low absorption, and a lot of it was explained on delayed or inadequate exchequer release. But what was interesting, when you look at the targets, then the targets had been achieved. If the targets were achieved with 30% absorption, then obviously it means you didn't need that money in the first place. But I don't think that is so. What I think is happening, Madam Speaker, is that the data that we are being fed with, the data we are using, may not be correct. So if data is brought to us so that the process goes on and they bear no relation to reality, Madam Speaker, we shall be wasting time. Data don't lie. It will tell. So, and this brought me, in this country during the coalition government, there was a practice that really was useful, the performance contracting, where the programs, the targets, and the indices were actually looked at very carefully. Ministries were even ranked. And therefore, you had no option but to have your program, have the targets, have the indices, and get checked. I think we need to go back, and that is what a budget policy statement says, to give you direction on how to move. We know now the president is keen to get a unit that actually monitors development. How can you monitor development if you do not have clear programs, clear targets, and indices and timelines? That is what you'd see, so that when we have a matrix that is coming in the budget policy statement, I think at this point, it's not so much of the amount of money. That will come in the estimate. But now is the how. So, Madam Speaker, we did not see that. Then, in the issue of stalled projects, Madam Speaker, what I saw in all these stalled projects, there is actually basically one big issue with it. It is changeover. Whether the changeover is at national government, when you have a new minister, probably a new permanent secretary, and all the new top leaders, then the projects that were there before seem to get lost and are not actually followed up. Whether you actually even go in our case in the CDF, again, it is when MPs change, and so the old projects are not given. Even if you look at the stalled projects that were actually related to structures that were in national government and were devolved, the devolution process did not take into consideration what are these stalled projects. So I think we should look at it and have a policy that indicates that if you are taking over any institution. And when funding comes, you must first of all start with stalled projects before you get into new projects. The same way we do with pending bills when it becomes the first charge. And the two are related. So I think that is really important. Madam Speaker, we looked at county allocation revenue guidelines that came, and we saw high personnel emoluments, pending bills, lack of asset registers. What this indicates is actually lack of structures. We should have done this during the evolution, but I think it should be done now. I want to say something about debt, and I may ask for a minute. I don't want to talk about external debt, but internal debt where the government is borrowing. We capped the interest. The interest is saying people cannot get money because we cap the interest, and now the government is borrowing internally and therefore competing. Whether this is a cartel just refusing people money to discredit the capping, I don't know. But is it possible? Some economists are here and say, can we also cap the borrowing by...
Thank you. Your time is over. You wish you had 1 more minute. We must follow the procedure. Honourable members have 13 more requests to make. Let us also avoid maybe repetition. Pursuant to Standing Order number 106, that arguments that may have been used by other members we may try to avoid, and we may not wish to maybe, of course, this to you, to use the 10 minutes because we have like 15 member requests, and I'm sure every member wants to contribute to this. So the member for South-Mu Girango, isn't it? Then we have the member for Kibwezi West.
I thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to this budget policy statement. One is I concur with the budget committee, which has really, when you look at each point that they've analyzed in their report, is a major indictment on the budget policy statement. You pick any underlining and it's just caution. They are cautioning that this is not reflective of what the current situation is and whether Kenya continues being a going concern if it continues in this trajectory. And Madam Speaker, it is important, as much as we've raised about figures, to talk about hope for this nation. A hope carried through within the confines of 3 pillars, which is the economy, which is our politics, and which is our social status as a nation. Because at the heart of being Kenyan is a heart of competitiveness, a heart of productivity. And this budget policy statement, in its entirety, is not addressing us. As per Article 95, we as members of Parliament have a responsibility towards all our constituents in the way we reflect and represent their aspirations on a day-to-day basis. And what do Kenyans aspire for? We wake up each morning to see, how is it I'm going to fend for my family? How is it that I'm going to contribute to the greater good and greater prosperity for this nation? And as you so ably look at, there are certain drivers to this economy which even the Treasury itself depends upon, which is our tourist earnings, our diaspora earnings, remittances, our exports. But this BPS speaks little about how many more acreages are we going to grow in terms of tea, how much are we going to expand in terms of coffee exports, how much are we going to expand...
Order. The members, starting from the chairperson, transport, the leader of majority, I know you're concerned. Please let us consult in low tones. Yes, let us give time and the space to the other members to contribute. Thank you. Musimba, carry on.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I was saying we have to look at our fundamentals. The things which at independence were making and were reading very ably in our geography. We were powerhouses in the arena of growth of wheat,
in our livestock production. And today, when you look at this budget policy statement, it doesn't go to the heart of returning us back to our competitiveness. We want to see in the population of our livestock. Today, we are importing our livestock from Ethiopia, from Tanzania, whatever we are consuming from here. We don't hear what are the incentives towards the livestock owners within Masai Land, within the greater, Garissa area, Wajir. How are we going to grow these livestock, populations? How are we going to have bigger AI programs which are going to improve the productivity for our milk-growing farmers? How are we going to go into the heart and say how much more in acreage of tea will we grow in Mount Elgon area, in Nyeri? How much of our arable land is actually being used? Because ultimately, we have to talk about what is coming into the kitty for us to expand to spend. But these things are not being touched. We talked about us being a tourist destination. But you can see into tourism, how much more are we improving our tourism product? Are we amplifying the fact that we are an unmatched safari destination? We are an unmatched beach destination. Our coastline is second to none in the world. Our temperate waters, and we've been blessed of having a coral coastline. So we must speak to economic hope by saying this BPS has to address every single constituency in Kenya to see how is Fafia affected, how is Kibwezi West affected, how does it encourage this growth across the country. We come, Madam Speaker, from an area where there's huge human-wildlife conflicts going on, and where we are people who are standing at the gates of those parks and saying to even tourists, don't support these parks. Why? Because they're only giving greater pain. What does that do to the greater country? It means you have less visitors visiting, because there's apathy by the locals. We can't address this unless we are serious. Funds like catering levy trustees have to look at how do we mitigate across this particular ambits. We have to grow. We have to look at every individual. A country is only great by the total sum of the savings that are being mobilized by each individual. But today, you cannot determine how much the cost of your utilities are going to be. There's no one in Kenya who can tell you with confidence what is the electricity bill going to be in the next, or their power consumption in the next 1 year. Are they going to buy firewood cheaper? Are they going to spend gas, in a particular fashion? What is going to be their water bills? So if you cannot be able to address our fundamentals towards cost of living, then what are we dreaming about growth when there's no savings which are being expected, to be grown by the individuals who are in there? Because you need to mobilize 50 million Kenyans, including children, to be able to be in an environment where we are growing up our total sum of our GDP in terms of how we consume, how we save, how we mobilize those savings, to be able for it to be onward distribution to our SMEs. Let's look at our cottage industries, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, since the 80s, when we were boasting about starting Juakali sheds, those cottage industries have not moved forward. We've not gotten to the point where the same tin trunk I was bought for by my parents to go to high school has not improved. It's still the same tin trunk that is being sold to children today in the year 2019. We are not putting investments into those people. We are not growing them. You look at Ngong Road when you go across, they make beautiful furniture. But how can we standardize that? Because those are the areas where we can be able to grow and say, we're going to become a country that exports furniture. Certainly within the Greater Lakes region is a region, it's 100 million people. The consumption habits are the same. But where are we better? We had programs like, last mile connectivity, rural electrification. This was all about growing cottage industries. We have a very developed human capital base in Kenya, people who are educated, and we've put enormous sums of money into the education sector. And we continue to make that investment. But that investment must actualize. And this is where, in the last regime, we had things like business process outsourcing, where we were thinking, the thinking was, how do you transform Kenya as a 24-hour economy so that we can be able to grow the monies which are coming in? You are an accountant by day, extend it in the evening. You are able to still do books for people who are in Venezuela, in America. in other markets and be able to improve our diaspora earnings, which are coming through. We are competent. When the day starts at 8, concludes at 5, somebody can still be able to put in another 2-3 hours of gainful time, and work. And this is remittances which coming in. Where are those incentives in this budget policy statement? Nowhere. We have to, the ICT sector is the one which moved Kenya to become a middle-level economy. But that's where we stopped. Are we optimizing our fiber optic networks? We invested greatly in having a fiber optics cables coming into Kenya. Today, what do we utilize it for? We are just on social media, but we are not optimizing these platforms to be able to get work coming from outside countries, deal with it in real time while they are asleep, and when they wake up, their work is ready. That is improving greater competitiveness with those people. When we look at our political setup, how do we grow our politics? We have to get to a point where we know that our political setup has heralded what you call a political economy. People who are active, in the politics, they're active into growing what our space for governance. We must be able to mainstream these people so that they're not lost. And this is the arena of lobbyists. Who will be out there to see what is best practice? How do we grow these practices for the betterment of our nation? Because being Kenyan is not an accident. Being Kenyan is a blessed thing. Because you are coming into a country which has great competitiveness, great potentiality, and we must all strive, and it has to be reflected into our BPS. And as we move towards estimates, my resolve of this House has to be the direct treasury to understanding that we must be keen to the fundamentals that made this our country great. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Very well. The Honorable Member for Pokot South, the Chairperson Transport. And for that, Honorable Makali, I know your card has been there for long, and I am aware that as a member of the House Business, you're going to consult, and given you are also the experience on this, but you must also give time. Yes, Honorable Member.
I thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And from the onset, I want to support the report and the budget policy statement. Madam Speaker, we as chairs, we made our presentation in the budget, and we want to thank that committee for doing really a great job in terms of compiling all our requests, all our recommendations put together. But Madam Speaker, I want to emphasize 2 points. One is on housing. You had honorable members here, Madam Speaker, speaking just a while ago that they don't understand the policy, and particularly they wanted to see the big four, the concentration of the big four in the budget policy statement. And Madam Speaker, because the big four, which is housing, is in my committee, I want to say, Madam Speaker, people expected a lot of money to be put in that housing. Maybe 2 trillion or something like that, because of the expectations of what a house would cost in terms of building. Madam Speaker, the policy is there. I also said this to the budget committee. So what is the policy? The policy in housing, Madam Speaker, is that the government is not building houses. And that's why you can't see the money in the budget or budget policy statement, for example. And eventually, in April, when it comes to estimates, you will not see a lot of money in housing. Madam Speaker, our policy is very clear, or the policy in government is very clear, that we want only to encourage, the private sector to come and build houses. Because, Madam Speaker, why would Exchequer, for example, build a house that is going to be sold anyway to the people of Kenya? It's an affordable house, and there are figures in terms of that. So what is it that is a policy? The policy is we want to excite, we want to encourage the private sector, Madam Speaker, so that then they can bring their money to build the houses. That is the policy direction in terms of housing. So what is the role of government? The role of government, Madam Speaker, is to put in what we call necessary facilities that will facilitate a good house, what we call a good house. So what are these facilities? Number one is the land itself. So that the houses, or the house becomes cheaper, then the private sector needs the land. So the government will look for the land. And when I mean government here, Madam Speaker, I'm talking about national government and also county government. There's a lot of collaboration between national government and county governments in terms of delivery of the affordable housing. So primary number one is that it is the government to look for land. That is a very big service that is required for the private sector then to build the houses. Number two is, if the land is very far from the road, or what we now have as a road, so what happens? The national government and the county government then therefore provides for the road towards wherever that land is for building those houses. Number three, provide for water. Because people need water. That house needs water. So where does the water come from? It's the national government then to provide for the water, or the county government, both working together. And then we also provide for electricity. So once government provides those 4 items or 5 items I've just mentioned, Madam Speaker, then now the private sector can come and build the houses in the land that has been acquired and found by both governments, that is national government and the county government. That is the policy, Madam Speaker. That is why you see people will not see money in this budget. That is policy number one. And Madam Speaker, the houses are going to be standard. The houses are going to be drawn by national government, and then the private sector will only come and put the money and build. And I want to say to the House, Madam Speaker, and honorable members, there are a lot of investors who have shown interest in terms of building the houses, Madam Speaker. There is only one small thing that is delaying us, and what delayed us, because the private sector then said to government, if we build these houses for you, and they are ready to be sold, and your Kenyans are not ready to buy, so where do we go? Will you hold my money? And that is why then national government proposed, and we passed in this floor of the House, Madam Speaker, a contribution which will go to the fund, housing fund. That housing fund, Madam Speaker, is supposed now to give cushion or surety to the private sector to say, if you build the house and the house is complete, and we have not sold, or the people of Kenya have not bought all the houses, then the government will buy the houses. So we have a cushion, Madam Speaker, in terms of the money. And that is why we had that 1.5% contribution from the employer and the employee. You know what delayed, Madam Speaker? Some people went to court, and they were willing to withdraw the case, and I would really urge that they withdraw the case so that we can move this process forward, Madam Speaker. The people of Kenya want the houses. They want the houses like yesterday, and that is why I'm pleading with them, whatever they are hearing, that they can withdraw that case so that we can be able to move forward. Madam Speaker, also, second question about the same housing. Kenyans are asking, where will the people of Kenya get houses? The national government has provided that fund, Madam Speaker, also, to cushion and to allow Kenyans to get mortgages, cheaper mortgages, Madam Speaker. There will be what we call mortgage refinancing, which already has been decided in terms of a policy direction, Madam Speaker. So that then the people of Kenya can be able to go and get the mortgage and buy the house, Madam Speaker. It is it's one of the best models I've ever seen, Madam Speaker, in my own life. And that is the policy in terms of housing that people need to understand, Madam Speaker, so that we can move together as a people. But what is lacking, Madam Speaker, which I presented in the budget committee, which I didn't see them capturing properly. When we brought the Department of Housing, Madam Speaker, they raised a very important point in terms of policy. They said, these monies that are supposed to provide for services, like roads, like water, like electricity, that money should not rest in the parent ministries. It should have been moved, Madam Speaker, so that they are managed in one unit called Department of Housing, Madam Speaker. Then that way, it will be very easier, or it will be easy for them then to move this housing project forward, Madam Speaker. We accepted with them. Because if the money let's say, for example, if you are making a road to a certain land, for that land to be built for the people of Kenya in terms of affordable housing, and maybe the Department of Roads, that might not be their priority at that particular time. So what happens? We'll get the land without a road, we'll get the land without water, it will delay the service, Madam Speaker. And that is the direction in terms of policy, and that is actually in the housing, Madam Speaker. I hope it is well understood. Second, Madam Speaker, that I want to make my contribution in this budget policy is on roads. Madam Speaker, roads is the nerve of this country. In fact, it should be a big one. It should be isolated to become a big one. It is the artery of this country. It is the movement of this country. Without roads, Madam Speaker, we are finished. The country is finished. And I'm wondering, Madam Speaker, whether what we are seeing as representatives of the people, because all members here, Madam Speaker, are affected by roads. I do not know whether the people who make the policy statement and even budget, Madam Speaker, do understand and feel the way we are feeling ourselves in terms of roads. Why am I saying that, Madam Speaker? In the budget policy statement that I made presentation this week on Tuesday, Madam Speaker, infrastructure department, that is roads, is in a deficit of 124 billion, Madam Speaker. You would wonder, what's going on? Who is not understanding what? That the people of Kenya need roads. And all these honorable members, Madam Speaker, I remember last budget, they really took me to task. I even went forward and proposed 8.7 billion, Madam Speaker, that every constituency will get 30 million to be able to repair their roads, Madam Speaker. It means it is a serious matter, Madam Speaker, that is required. But what is happening? The people who are supposed to do it seem not to be seeing, Madam Speaker, that we have a serious problem in terms of deficit. And we need roads. Everybody needs roads here. Every honorable member, I cannot even sit on the corridors. They take me around and ask me for roads. Of course, I wish I had powers to give roads, Madam Speaker. But these honorable members have the power to give the money. So give the 124 billion coming April, and then come to ask for the roads. And every member will get a road. But Madam Speaker, because of resources, we have made a proposal as a committee. We have not kept quiet and lament for the way I'm talking. We know there's a deficit of 124 billion. We know we have a budget problem in terms of course, scarcity of resources. We have made a proposal, Madam Speaker, to budget committee in terms of policy that we want them to agree with us. And what is the proposal? We have proposed, Madam Speaker, to create a roads bond under Kenya Roads Board, so that, Madam Speaker, we can be able to float a bond of 300 billion, Madam Speaker. And we have the money to securitize. We have about 54 billion for fuel levy, Madam Speaker. And we have discussed in the ministry, and they are ready to use part of that or percentage of that money to securitize for that transport or roads bond, Madam Speaker. In that way, and I think this is the best time to discuss and agree. That's why I'm saying the people who draft these things, I don't know whether they feel the feelings of the people of Kenya like we feel as elected members of parliament. So, Madam Speaker, I want to ask honorable members, as we even approach April, when it comes to estimate, I want them to support this department, Madam Speaker. And I want them to find, or we find together the 124 billion so that everybody gets a road. If you don't get that money, Madam Speaker, I will tell them, don't follow me to ask for roads, Madam Speaker. I will follow you for money. And with those many remarks, or few remarks, honorable members,
thank you, Chair.
I thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this chance.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Let's get to the academic and experience from Honorable Makali Mulu.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. At long last, I've got an opportunity to say something. Madam Speaker, I've listened to the members make contributions. And Madam Speaker, I want to remind the members that this is a policy statement. It is not budget estimates. So even as we contribute, when we narrow it down to issues of houses, roads, there will be time to discuss that. And I think, Madam Speaker, what we need now is to question the policies which the government has put forward. This document was approved by the cabinet, and it means it's actually a policy document in terms of what the government is thinking in this country for the next 1 year. Madam Speaker, just from the word go, when you look at this budget policy statement, it is projecting a budget deficit of 5.6, meaning, Madam Speaker, after we do all our collections as a country, we'll be expected to borrow out there to the tune of 5.6 of the budget. And to me, the question is, Madam Speaker, the policy question is, what is the policy of this government in terms of moving towards a balanced budget, or what we call kind of a zero budget, so that you don't have to borrow? That's the first question. And Madam Speaker, listening to the members have spoken about the Big Four. And I like the comments that when you look at this budget, the Big Four, we have a big issue. In terms of total budget, you realize it's only about 6% of the total budget, direct government funding, which is going to the Big Four. Direct. And then there's what they are called the enablers, in terms of making sure that we get this Big Four achieved. And I think that's what Chair Proceedings is talking about, because roads are enabling environment. And I think, Madam Speaker, the question we need to ask is, in terms of this Big Four, the government is indicating that some might be taken by the private sector. But the question is, have we put in place measures that will ensure that the private sector is able to provide that complement this government effort? Because if that doesn't work, then this policy will not be achievable. And that's what I think these are the hard questions. The other question, Madam Speaker, in terms of policy. Madam Speaker, let's look at the domestic savings policy, what Musimba has talked about, Honorable Musimba. In this country, we are saving about 18.6 as a country. Our investment is about 24%. So what is the policy to grow our domestic savings so that we bridge this gap of between domestic savings and investments? Because unless that becomes zero, we will continue borrowing. And these are the questions we need to ask the government. So that as we move forward, we need to see deliberate efforts to grow our domestic savings as a country so that we avoid getting funding from out there. The other important point, Madam Speaker, is the issue of what we call on-source revenue at the county level. Counties, if you look at the counties, Madam Speaker, now, counties, almost all counties in this country are collecting lower than they used to collect when they were municipal councils or town councils or whatever they were. And the question is, what has happened? So somebody needs to sit down somewhere on the side of the executive and tell us what is the policy from the government side in terms of on revenue, on source revenue, so that we grow this revenue at the county levels. Unless we do that, Madam Speaker, then we continue having the problem. And you realize that then we will never grow these counties as anticipated. Madam Speaker, the other point is, when you talk to everybody in this country, there's the economies of cartels. When you talk to everybody in this country, either in agriculture, in industry, whatever sector, people will tell you that there are cartels which are blocking Kenyans from accessing the resources or the results of these resources. We know, like agriculture, if you take an example of fertilizer. Madam Speaker, we put money for fertilizer every year. But how much fertilizer gets down to the ground so that farmers can grow their crops and harvest, increase yield, Madam Speaker? So the question is, as a matter of policy, what is the government policy in kind of dismantling these cartels which you keep on talking about? Because unless there's a policy in terms of how to relate to the cartels, then automatically we continue having a problem. And to me, these are the difficult questions we need to ask. And when I read the policy statement, these things don't come out clear. And that's why I'm saying, I think to some extent, the executive is talking, but in terms of implementation, they will not achieve anything because they need to come up with very clear strategies in terms of how to achieve some of these targets. The other point, Madam Speaker, I like what Musiba has just mentioned, the issue of the fiber optic. This country has invested a lot in terms of IT. But look at what is happening, Madam Speaker. I'm sure if I talk to most of my colleagues here, the honorable members, you find they have hired the so-called brokers to tell us every day what is happening in their constituencies, so and so has moved here, so and has moved here. But Madam Speaker, if there was a clear policy, this would be an opportunity to use this fiber optic to make sure that we create jobs. We do international jobs while seated in Kenya and send the results to those countries and get your check home. In that case, we are growing the economy and we'll be helping these young people. So, Madam Speaker, to me, there are serious policy questions which will be asked about this document, which I don't think have been answered. And that's why I'm saying, Madam Speaker, let's talk about pending bills, honorable members. Has anybody thought about what is the impact of policy pending bills in terms of local economies? If I were to ask you, if you go to your counties, I'm sure you must have lost about 2 suppliers or 3 contractors who have actually died as a result of blood pressure, which resulted from non-payment of a bill where they went to a bank, got a loan, they were not paid by the county government, so you collapse and they die. Small businesses have died because of pending bills. So, has anybody analyze the impact of this kind of pending bills? And if so, then, what is the government policy in terms of pending bills relating to the local economies where we come from, where small businesses have died, and even big contractors have died because they took loans from banks and they have not been paid for years, so these loans have actually made them bankrupt. We need a policy on that, Madam Speaker. As I conclude, Madam Speaker, because a lot of things have been said, it is clear in this country, Madam Speaker, there is a clear policy that the wage bill in our whatever, national government or county governments, should not go beyond that 5%. Either national or county government. How many counties are within that range? How many counties are below 35? And in a situation where more than 80% of the counties are above that level, what is the government policy? Is it to change that figure from 35 to 40? Or what mechanism are they going to put in place to make sure that then we are within that? Because I don't imagine somebody just woke up one morning and said it has to be that 5%. Madam Speaker, there must be There must be serious thinking and serious analysis to achieve at that 5. And it's internationally known. If you have to go beyond that 5, then you start eating on the development budget. And then you will not be able to develop, because for you to grow, you need to invest. So, Madam Speaker, these are the hard questions which I think we need to ask as a House. And I agree with all those members who said, unless we do something, Madam Speaker, this just might become another talking show. And I don't think we really need to get to that level. So if you have to achieve the big 4, Madam Speaker, we need serious work on this big 4 so that this country can grow. And when the country grows, it will help us, it will help our children, and it will even help the rural areas. So with those remarks, Madam Speaker, let me stop there. I don't want to go to the figures, because to me, I thought we need to question the policy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Very well, honourable members. I must direct that, just for your information, that this report has to end today, the debate on this. And for that matter, as a matter of procedure, I'll give the honourable member for Game 5 minutes, and the honourable member for Tharaka, the other side, 5 minutes, then they'll move to reply.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I rise to support the budget policy statement, let me say from the onset, what I expected from the statement was pragmatic and prudent steps in rationalizing where to spend each coin, because this is at the core of the fabric of our society. And also, as a student of inferential statistics, I expected to see a correlation between the Big 4 and the resource allocation to the Big 4 agenda. And looking at food and nutrition, I've not seen a clear intervention or strategy in how we are going to help Kenyans have food on their table. I would have imagined that there would be a clear statement on an intervention on how we'll buy fertilizers for the country. And also, looking at manufacturing, I have not seen a clear statement on how we want to reduce the cost of electricity, on a strategy on how we can encourage manufacturing firms to produce in the nights.
1 minute.
I think, let me say this. If you ask me, I would ask Treasury to think deeper, because this country is going through debts. If you ask me, I would say, let us restructure our loans and let the country breathe for 5 years, and we start paying our debts after 5 years, so that we can achieve the Big 4 agenda. Or else, we are headed on a deliberate cliff that we may not save one another. Thank you.
Very well, very well. Thank you. Members, I must pronounce, we have the member for Ngembe South, member for Kajiado East, member for the Osoti member, among others that want to contribute to this, but because of the honorable member for Ngembe South, not Ngembe South, the member for Tharaka. Actually, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much. I've been here ever since. My few remarks in support of the policy statement are that the actual budget is going to come to this House, and this House is going to discharge its duty, one of which includes budgeting. However, let me speak on behalf of the judiciary, because in the policy statement we have allocations for Parliament, which is where we sit, and we will speak for ourselves. The executive also has its allocation, and it is the executive that is actually making these proposals, and as such, it is the judiciary that possibly needs to be spoken for. I belong to the Committee of Justice and Legal Affairs, and the judiciary came over and made an elaborate representation on why they required an additional 3 billion to cover their expenses. I'm happy to note that actually the committee made a representation to the budget committee, and an extra 1 billion was allocated to the judiciary. It is vitally important that the judiciary is well funded so that we have all these courts strewn across the country getting completed. I have my own court in the Raka constituency at Marimanti that requires about 20 million to complete, and it's vitally important that we make a provision for this. It's also important to note that courts are understaffed, and we have a problem with one major court, the Environment and Land Court, that needs to employ more judges to deal with our land cases. It is important that we fund the judiciary so that it can take care of this and ensure that we have enough staff to dispense justice. It is also important to note that we actually require to modernize our courts so that when we go there, we are able to get our proceedings done quickly, and this can only be done if we provide sufficient funds. And unfortunately, my 5 minutes are over. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the little I have said. Thank you.
Very well. This member who has been there for long and has been together with the members whose cards are here and hanging. The member for Bomachoge Borabu. You may use the other, or maybe whatever you're going to give him, because his box has not. Yes, no, it's working. Now it's working.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to make a contribution on two areas. One of the challenges that the country has been facing are the number of strikes, ranging from the Ministry of Health all across the Ministry of Education to our universities. I do not see any pronunciation on how these strikes could be reduced, because they have a cost implication. They drain the budget. At the end of it, we do not have any gain. I would like to see the strategies that could be in place to ensure that, that issues like delay to submit statutory contributions and the pension are well addressed, so that we do not see a situation where the country is a striking nation. Number two, I'd like also to see a strong statement on prioritizing stalled projects. I speak from experience in my constituency of Machoge Borabu. I think I'm the leading constituency in this country with that I will require about 200 million to deal with stalled projects. When we stall the projects, we lock the revenue that is supposed to be generated. So we need a clear policy that brings out and prioritizes the ways to address all stalled projects. Finally, when I look at the Big Four, I feel like there's a sector that has not been well represented in the policy statement. The sector on agriculture. We are talking of many challenges. We know that there have been delays in the payment of farmers. There have been delays in supply of fertilizers. And this has been a kind of a discouraging experience. What is the executive likely to do to ensure that similar situations are not seen in the future, so that we can talk of a country with a stable food security? What about the challenges that are coming from importation of fish? What about the challenges that are coming from stalled or non-functional coffee factories and the collapsing tea industry? I think we need a statement on that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Very well, very well. Before I call the member to reply, allow me to appreciate the request by the Honorable Member for Igebe South, the member for Kajiado East, Honorable Joyce, who are in the House and wish to speak. But because of procedures, members, I now call upon the mover to reply. Honorable Lois.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to reply to this very, very important motion. Madam Speaker, let me take this opportunity to thank members who have vigorously participated in contributing to this budget policy statement, Madam Speaker. And I want to assure members that we've listened to them very keenly. We have heard their contributions. We have listened to the creativity they want to see while writing the budget policy statement, Madam Speaker, that they would like to see a budget policy statement that is rich in matters policy, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as Budget and Appropriations Committee, we shall make sure that we communicate these sentiments to the technocrats at Treasury on their need to really put more time and more thinking whenever they are writing this budget policy statement, Madam Speaker. Of more importance, Madam Speaker, the need to manage debt in this country will definitely be a matter that will be in the minds of everyone, including ourselves as Budget and Appropriations Committee, and equally the guys at Treasury, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we've listened to members that they want to see more concern on the productivity sectors, more so agriculture, Madam Speaker, that we know it is the biggest employer and the one that contributes most, Madam Speaker, to the GDP of this, our great republic, Madam Speaker. We'll make sure, Madam Speaker, that also in future, the budgetary requirements for institutions like judiciary, Madam Speaker, that they will continue accessing more funding, Madam Speaker, and we'll make sure that the right limit will actually be given in the next budget, Madam Speaker, so that the judiciary can take a leading role in dispensing justice in this republic, and more importantly, in this subject of fight against corruption, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there is a very important fund called the National Government Constituency Development Fund, Madam Speaker. This is a fund which is being felt down to the constituencies. This is a fund, Madam Speaker, where very little or close to zero is stolen, Madam Speaker. This is a fund which is implemented by the Wanjiku on the ground, Madam Speaker, and also will continue ensuring that there's more funding to this particular fund, Madam Speaker, including to address the subject of arrears of 4.9 billion shillings, Madam Speaker, which we hope to be able to achieve that, Madam Speaker, in the next budget. And Madam Speaker, with those very, very few remarks, I want to thank you, Madam Speaker, also for taking your time to preside over this very, very important session. Definitely, Madam Speaker, it will go into the records of this republic that the budget policy statement for 2019-2020 was passed while you presided over the House. I thank you for that, Madam Speaker. And with those remarks, Madam Speaker, I beg to reply. I thank you.
You beg to reply. Order members. Honourable members. Oh, no, not yet time. Not yet time. Leader majority, I can see. Honourable members, the House is not properly constituted for me to be able to put the question on motion number 10. That is on the reports of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the 2019-2020 budget policy statement. And so I do order that the question to the report will be put at the right time, at least it will be slotted in our order paper. And now, members, the time being 7 p.m., this House stands adjourned till Tuesday, March 5th, 2019, at 2:30 p.m. I thank you all.